Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to our live stream of video game news and Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Particularly today, it's going to be more video game news since the Game Awards happened. Um, so I guess we need to do some downloading. This probably won't take but a second, though. Um, so I watched the Game Awards, and overall, I would say that, well, I guess it's more honest to say I watched the Game Awards for the first half at least, and then fell asleep while watching while the second half started to play. I missed the whole back half, but there really isn't a lot that I missed. Um, Overall, it did feel like it was a better award season show by not actually being a award show so much. But it did create a interesting situation in that so many of the awards that they gave out didn't have anyone coming up and making a speech at all, which I think highlights a issue. I'm not even really reading what these announcements are. That's how little I'm gonna pay attention as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. Like, the God of War voice actor came out for one of the early awards, gave a fairly long speech with, I believe it was Al Pacino giving the award or announcing the award, which was weird, certainly. And the Al Pacino immediately highlighted an issue that they had a teleprompter with a font too small, or that it was just too far away in general, and he couldn't read the teleprompter. So then Al Pacino looks like he's doing the thing that he's actually doing, which is just reading from a teleprompter, and doesn't probably even know where he is, let alone what he's doing. And that's probably true for any actor of any age, is that they mostly just reading teleprompters for these award shows. I think we've got everything else here as far as things that could be new. But even later on, I saw another announcer or recipient struggling with the teleprompter. But after the God of War, let's see what is actually in the structure deck. I should actually see how many copies I actually own of each of these cards. Oh, this is great. This is like pretty much the best case scenario as far as a structure deck, in that I had basically 0 copies of each of these cards. Now, when you buy these structure deck cards, though, you still are running into the problem of them not being dissolvable for crafting points. But yeah, that's a minimal issue, really. So yeah, it definitely always seems like it's the right move in this game just to buy 3 copies of the structure deck, and we've got the gems to account for that. In fact, we probably have enough gems to account for opening more card packs than even that, but maybe we should wait until the new selection packs are available. Okay, so we'll spend 1,500 on this, but these take up deck slots too, so it is this weird catch-22 where at some point you might need to spend 250 just to have a structure deck, unless structure decks actually don't take up space. They really shouldn't. But yeah, after the first God of War announcement, they pretty much didn't do any other major speeches. Doug Bowser was there, and Reggie Fils-Aimé was there. Reggie really had no business being there and sitting one chair in front of Doug Bowser. Reggie Fils-Aimé certainly still rubbing elbows with video game people when he really should just be gone. So yeah, this would be a great deck to open 10 packs for. We have 31 days to do that, and if I did that right now and opened potentially 30 packs, then I would get secret packs. We also have secret pack, a selection pack here that probably isn't a good candidate. Yeah, I don't think I would open this secret pack. Doug Bowser being there for representing Nintendo of America, and frankly also representing Platinum Games, which wasn't there, and also representing, interesting, we're having some network congestion. I think it might actually just be legitimate network congestion. Like, I think that kind of highlights the issue, certainly, with Nintendo and Japanese companies not really caring about the Game Awards, with the maker of Death Stranding being not really a Japanese company. He may be a Japanese person, but he has moved to California to be a Hollywood elite type person, which that's probably a terrible phrase to use, but he wants to rub elbows certainly with Hollywood actors and things like that as far as Kojima. So I really wouldn't call his company a Japanese company. But yeah, no actual people from Platinum Games. There were people there from Elden Ring, and there was one interview from, I think, Kojima himself, where he came on stage and only spoke Japanese and yet seemed completely capable of understanding everything that was being said to him or asked to him in English. So either they prearranged the questions for him, so he already had a response, and then they had the translator speak his response out, or he is just totally capable of understanding English, which most Japanese people, I think, are capable of understanding a single question in English, and just unwilling to speak it himself, which, fair enough, but it's weird, certainly for an interview. It creates a very weird situation, though, where Nintendo products, like first-party Nintendo games, or at least games that you'd think were first-party Nintendo games, I think Xenoblade Chronicles was one of them, win an award, and yet Doug Bowser doesn't go up and give an acceptance speech of anything like that for that game. And then Bayonetta 3 gets an award, and Doug Bowser does get up and do an acceptance speech for that one. Okay, we're immediately skipped to level 7 on this Duels Cup. Which, okay, what's the rewards list on this? Gems. We can always use that. Duels Cup reward, tickets times 5. Gems. And then second stage Duelist. And then if we get to the second stage, and we're possibly within, let's say, the thousands to 10,000 spot, we would get a bronze finalist. Probably this is a icon and 10 tickets. If we can get higher, then you will get more tickets until you're in the top 100, and then you're in the 7th, you get a silver finalist. Is this top 100 and top 10 of the world, or is this a percentage? Probably is top 10 in the world. Okay. Doesn't seem like there's any limitations on the deck that you play, so that makes it easy to build a deck at least. Inherently, I like the idea of the Game Awards being very little awards and very much just showing us ads all the time. I don't really like the idea of the music. Like, there was 2 musical numbers, and one was like from God of War and one was from Diablo 4, and I didn't even listen to the Diablo 4 song. But yeah, I don't think that that's necessary. If anything, I think perhaps the musical parts would be the time to run a bathroom break type collection of advertisements. But since you're actually there to look at the advertisements, perhaps the musical breaks are literally there just for bathroom breaks of people watching. I kind of feel like the whole award show would be better if it was pre-recorded just a couple of hours earlier. Most notably, that is fairly obvious in this year's award show, as some Twitch streamer, nobody basically, walked on stage, and I guess the question is how he even got in the building. At the very end of the show, a Twitch streamer got on stage basically pretending like he was with the Elden Ring crew, and then at the end stood in front of the microphone and said some kind of internet meme I'm not familiar with about thanking a Orthodox rabbi, Bill Clinton, which that sounds like a meme, but it's not something that makes any sense to me at all. So certainly didn't improve the event, and it's not really what you would want, is that all of a sudden a bunch of Twitch streamers are sneaking into places and running on stage. After the whole Will Smith slap thing, you would think that there would be some level of security to stop that kind of thing right at the front of the stages as they're stepping up. Perhaps this is a stage issue in the Game Awards, in that there are just steps that go up and the steps are way too wide, and instead of there being steps on the side of the stages only, you can probably eliminate a lot of people sneaking onto the stage if they're running towards the center of the stage and then trying to lift themselves up 3 or 4 feet, instead of having just like security guards and on the sides of steps. But really, any amount of security there should have existed. And had that been pre-recorded, then that whole event would not have gone out live and would not still be a part of the stream as of when I watched it several hours later. Jeff Keighley came on and very quickly ended the show, but he probably was going to end the show fairly quickly anyways at that point. Not that they really had a hard out and that they needed to run particularly that short. He did the right thing by not mentioning it, but it's going to take some masterful video editing to edit the guy out of standing in the background. Like, it probably is a 3 or 4 camera setup, so maybe they could get different angles to edit the guy out. And like the part where he stands in front of the microphone, you could certainly edit out and cut that fairly quickly, and you'd just have maybe a very rough jump cut. But the part where he's walking up to the stage and standing behind other people giving their speeches, and see if that was pre-recorded, obviously what you would do is go, all right, we grab the guy. They did grab the guy and arrest the guy, or the security people detained him. See if the police really arrest and press any kind of charges, and I'm not sure really what charges you could press other than trespassing, disturbing the peace, things like that. But if it was pre-recorded, you would have just said 1,000 apologies to the Elden Ring team. Will everybody please just stay in the seats, and we're just gonna have them give their speech a second time and do that. In fact, maybe you don't even have everybody in their seats. You say you re-record that whole section as far as the speech in an empty arena, but actually that would be bad for sound. It is better just to ask all the people who are actually invited there to stay, and we'll just redo the speech. Like, but yeah, there's really no value in it being live at all. Nobody that's officially there is going to leak something a couple hours early. And even if it did leak a couple hours early, is it really that big of a deal? Like, I just don't think it really is. So, let's talk briefly. We'll cover the entire awards through the video game news, but briefly I would like to say, watching it on Steam, the whole reason I was watching the Game Awards is to potentially win a Steam Deck, and that was a nightmare watching it on Steam.tv. Steam.tv, first of all, is not a page that really even exists until about 5 minutes before the show showed up. It would just forward you to steam.com, and there was really just a video pop-up thing that was actually collapsed when I saw it on my phone, and so I had to expand it. So I was watching it on my phone, and it's not a good experience. I couldn't really speak 100% to the streaming capability of Valve, but it probably isn't as good as Twitch or YouTube. You just have to assume that Twitch and YouTube have more experience there and more bandwidth there as far as the streaming quality. There definitely were a couple points when the footage was a little blurry and then had to up its resolution when the bandwidth filled up. There was a counter that said at one point like 300,000 or 400,000 people were watching via Steam.tv instead of just watching the YouTube feed or Twitch feed directly. And when it was saying at the bottom 300,000 or 400,000 people were watching, somebody in the chat said 750,000 people were watching, which means the numbers are not in any way consistent. Throughout the part that I was able to stay awake for, it dropped considerably, that number. I don't know how accurate it was. It was at one point kind of a peak of 300,000 or 400,000, and then it seemed like they dropped 100,000, and then it seemed like eventually 40 minutes in they had dropped another 100,000, and so there was a low point of 150,000. It was saying people watching. This is inherently also people who almost 100% were watching in hopes of winning a Steam Deck every minute, the 512 gigabyte version, which is actually the better versions of the Steam Deck. Although not the best version of the Steam Deck. And that inherently was the major problem with watching it on Steam.tv, is that unless you just zoomed in and didn't watch the chat was insanely useless. Insanely useless and terribly, terribly moderated. At the beginning, everybody had either bots running or just a general idea that you were doing some kind of like Nightbot code to win a Steam Deck, when none of the instructions or registration said anything about that. All you had to do was watch. It knew whether you were watching or not. You didn't have to go in the chat and post anything at all. And yet there was 9 out of every 10 posts was either a bot or somebody copying somebody else just out of stupidity, just like sheep following sheep, doing exclamation point Steam Deck for, I would say, 5 to 15 minutes at the beginning. Exclamation Steam Deck. They eventually seemed to block exclamation point Steam Deck as spam, which then led everybody to doing exclamation point claim. And so then it was probably until about 40 minutes in that they finally blocked exclamation point claim. Now, arguably, as soon as you started to see exclamation point claim show up as people were replacing exclamation point Steam Deck, you would have just said, you know what, let's just block anybody who's doing one word posts that start with an exclamation point. That's a fairly easy regex search. I can tell it to you right now. You do a top of a hat, upper sand, whatever, caret symbol. It's a pointer pointing up. That tells regex to look at the beginning of the post. Then you would do exclamation and then period and then ampersand, and that's all you'd have to do. Yeah, I think maybe there's a way to make sure that that would only match one word, but anybody who's better at regex than me, which is most people who do regular expressions, could do a search like that. At the very least, you could have, even if you had a system that wasn't doing regex and you had to type in the exact default response, it doesn't take 20 minutes to say, let's ban exclamation point claim. But eventually, 40 minutes into it, they ban exclamation point claim, which just then leads everybody to doing /claim. And /claim was working fairly frequently right up until about the time I fell asleep. Like, it probably was, I'm saying 40 minutes, but there was also like a 30-minute presentation before the actual Steam Awards, which honestly, that 30-minute previous presentation should also just be integrated into the whole presentation. Like, that seems silly to kind of separate it out. I think a lot of the reasons why there weren't so many people giving speeches too is that I suspect Sony really was not participating in the Game Awards so much. Like, Microsoft was there, Larry Herb was there, and Doug Bowser was there from Nintendo. So it really would just be Sony that wouldn't have shown up or sent their team, even though it's just Nintendo of America, Doug Bowser. It's not any of the actual Japanese people from Nintendo. That's another point, certainly, too. If it was pre-recorded, it would not be hard to mail statues to everybody who won and have them pre-record something in Japan to say thank you and have a pre-recorded speech that they would say thank you to. Although I don't inherently think that's the issue. I think the Japanese companies literally just don't want to allow employees to have any accolade or win any awards, and they want to keep them down morally and spiritually. So yeah, back to the Steam Deck chat. Chat was absolutely useless. It, at best, outside of all of that noise, was a small barometer as far as just how interested people were in specific video games being shown or talked about, which mostly boiled down to the fact, and it really shows. I bet nobody really has any footage of what the chat looked like to do any statistics other than Valve, and they probably would never release it, but it really goes to show that actual gamers, people who play on Steam, aren't that interested in these games being announced because they just don't know anything about these games, and a lot of them are just looking for the next Call of Duty versions and the things that they're familiar with and they like. Whereas the opposite swing happens as far as the people in the audience of the Game Awards, in which you have a lot of people applauding and whooping and hollering about games that they probably worked on or their friends worked on that is just getting no fanfare at all. There's in the chat, there's just like nobody saying anything interesting at all in chat. Chats in general are mostly useless, and as bad as something like Reddit or even Twitter is, at least there's some thought being put into those posts where a chat is just like one word responses, and it just becomes a real nightmare. Now, I will make an exception for the chat that shows up on my channel because there's so few people typing in the chat of my channel when people do type in the chat of my channel that there really can be conversations that happen there and interactions. Whereas when you have 100,000 people all typing in the same chat, that doesn't really work very well. But yeah, the chat was utterly useless on Steam.tv, and the announcements for the Steam Decks were implemented incredibly poorly. It seemed like what it was is that they had basically just a OBS type layer on top of the chat that was just permanently there. So if you once the chat very quickly scrolled up, that yeah, Steam.tv's chat also does not let you stay in a specific position. So when you start scrolling up, it's still adding text. So even if I did see something longer and wanted to read it, I tried it several times. I could not scroll back up to that message, nor could I stay on that message long enough to read it. It was just always coming off as a deluge of gibberish. But the actual Steam Awards, I was just an overlay with a color gradient behind it, which noticeably the color gradient that they chose wasn't even in the color palette that would be correct for Steam. It was more of a light blue to purple color gradient instead of a black to dark blue color gradient, which was the way the rest of the page looked. Although in all fairness, it might actually have been in the right color gradient of the way Steam used to look, whereas now it's just getting darker and darker and less blue, which is really what it should do anyways. It's just abandon the blue concept. On the layer, it was supposed to be giving out a Steam Deck every minute. There's zero chance that they were actually giving out a Steam Deck every minute announcement. There's probably some legalese that is going to have them have to make a lot of make goods to make sure for every minute that show went, there was a Steam Deck that was being given away. But undoubtedly, I think at least half of the people who should have won a Steam Deck, and I hope will win a Steam Deck, did not have their user ID announced as winning a Steam Deck, because it seemingly was running some kind of searches very slowly. They just didn't have the processing power for it, I would imagine. as far as finding all of the people who were watching at that one specific minute, and then doing a random selection of amongst that group of one winner. The odds aren't great for any contest, undoubtedly, but in those low numbers, if they were accurate, if you were 1 out of 150,000 or so people competing for a Steam Deck, that's not terrible odds, particularly since you're not putting any money in and not really gambling, just wasting your time and investing your time into potentially winning a Steam Deck. But man, my internet is just reconnecting a lot today. Yeah. This may be YouTube's fault. This may be my internet's fault. I don't know why it would be either, really. But yeah. As far as I know, I did not win a Steam Deck, but I also wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people get emails or notifications over the next couple of days saying they did win a Steam Deck because it was just so broken. It definitely just put the whole chat in cross points. Yet there were other limitations to the Steam Deck giveaway too. You had to have registered beforehand, and you had to be in particularly good standing on Steam, which is to say you couldn't have just created an account when they announced the Steam Deck giveaways, because you wouldn't be an old enough account to have qualified, and you would have had to have made a purchase in the past year, which is no problem for most people who play on Steam, is that you would have almost certainly purchased something in the past year, or past 12 months, really. But when you pair the giant amount of spam and hype trying to win Steam Decks and just the total lack of interest in a lot of the announcements of games, it does give me this slight thought that a lot of people want a Steam Deck and either don't know what they really would do with it, or they want a Steam Deck specifically for games they already own or emulation or something like that, which, yeah, that's very believable, certainly. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people who want a Steam Deck are going to try to very quickly use it as an emulation Game Boy type device more than as a competitor to the Switch that can play a little bit more games. One of the things, I was looking at that Proton DB website, and I was able to click a tag to filter out things that had just been verified and go through that whole list a second time. As far as like just like seeing all the games that would run on a Steam Deck in my library, and it really, particularly looking at like the Lego games and the kids games, there's probably about 30 or 40 kids games I own. There's just not that many kids games. Of the 1,500 games in the list, it kind of felt like it dumped down to about 150 games that would have been rated platinum on Proton DB as just being really, really compatible with the Steam Deck. And of that 150, it's about 15 that are kids friendlies. So 1% of my entire collection is playable on the Steam Deck and kids friendliness. With that kind of numbers, you fairly obviously need a need emulation to back that up. And then when you really start to think about emulation, you probably need a lot more storage. Max level is 20, not 10. For a second there, I thought it was 10, and I was like, oh man, we might be fairly close just to start here. So, yeah. I also, for the accountability section, which is, I guess is what all this is, played a little bit of Killer 7, but obviously spending the extra time, I could have gotten at least 1 or 2 episodes of Killer 7 done had I not watched the Game Awards. And instead I was watching Big Mouth, which, yeah, I'm still watching it and still enjoying it. Like, it caught its stride. I'm at season 4 now. Or more and more, I will say, Big Mouth is becoming more of a situation comedy with a smaller overarching narrative each season. But yeah, it does have a lot of episodes that are just completely not connected. Like, there was one episode where everybody all of a sudden had superpowers, and at the end of the episode they had to write that back, and they've done that multiple times where they're just goofing with the continuity of it and saying, oh yeah, that really didn't happen. One thing I guess I could say, as far as if you were potentially going to watch Big Mouth at all and kind of scared off that it's going to be like the first season where it's all just about like puberty and sex jokes, they do later on in seasons get to a point where they're also talking about anxiety and depression kind of associated with just going through puberty. It's still, I'd say, 80% puberty and sex jokes. That you never get away from that, but they stop it being the main and only focus that that exists in the story. Let's see. Well, I don't think that worked out too well. I kind of think the jokes are getting a little bit better too around season 3. But it is also very obviously a show for adults only, and only a certain kind of adult who likes a lot of dirty jokes is going to really like it. Did I do anything else? Not really. So the Christmas season is on us, and Minecraft has a holiday gift guide. I figured I'd point this out. This is obviously Microsoft owns Mojang. A lot of things you can purchase. Are they realistic prices? $65 for an ugly sweater seems like a little bit of an expense. $8.99 for a metal ornament. I guess the question is, do you get free shipping on this? Because that could definitely cost a lot more. Very rarely nowadays do you have the shipping and handling scam that was the standard way of doing things in the old days. But yeah, it definitely was the old way of doing things used to be everything was extra shipping, extra for shipping, extra for handling, and that way you would inherently have to pay a lot more for something than you thought you were going to pay for it. And that it basically is just a bait and switch situation where they are pretending like it's one price. Oh, these Firefox tabs are just awful. The little arrows you have to click on, but you can't click too fast because then it will jump a whole section. So it's like click 1 second, click 1 second, click wait a second, click wait a second, click wait a second, click wait a second. Are these even things? Yeah. Today my Steam fall list wasn't working, so I'm gonna I just skipped that. Today's kind of a great day to not do any fall list cleanup anyways. However, after today I definitely need to do YouTube Shorts, and honestly I should just be doing YouTube Shorts after every single stream anyways, because it's leaving too many tabs open and creating this nightmare scenario. The jumps also seem like they are very large, like it's going from the first 50 tabs to the next 50 tabs to the next 50 tabs, which, yeah, that doesn't work. Yeah, can we win here? Do I even care? Not really. Alright, so some of this is probably redundant news. The Division Resurgence getting a new trailer and closed beta test in Europe. Sony has announced a free PlayStation Plus online multiplayer weekend. Access to online gaming will be offered without charge, but from December 10th to the 11th. Seems like you probably want to do that, like, for the Christmas, December 25th to the New Year, and maybe just all of December, like depending on just how expensive they really want to pretend it is to run their servers. But yeah, I would say all of December, starting at Black Friday. It would probably be smart to just say free online from Black Friday to the New Year. Yes, people who buy new PlayStations will more than likely have a free 30 days of PlayStation Network anyways, assuming they are doing that, which I would have to assume they are. Xbox 360s always came with free 30 days of Xbox Live. But bringing people back who potentially have not turned on their PlayStation in a few months would also be an ideal thing, to just get your numbers up as high as possible so that in your quarterly reports you can say we have massive numbers. So Hideo Kojima teasing another actor for his next title ahead of potential Game Award reveal. This is old news. It seems most likely that the teases for this next game were actually just teases for Death Stranding 2, which was announced at the Game Awards. It seems like Death Stranding 2 is a continuation of Death Stranding 1, although it might also jump back in time at some points to be a bit of a flashback story too. But yeah, there is a gray-haired Norman Reedus in the game, so now the weirdness there certainly is, did anybody follow or remember what the story events of Death Stranding were? Because while that probably was the main draw, I think a lot of people just stuck with Death Stranding because it was so pretty, and probably wouldn't want to come back and play Death Stranding a second time for its gameplay mechanics or for its story experience. I guess it's worth mentioning we didn't see any Monster Energy drinks or anything in the trailer for Death Stranding 2. Street Fighter 6 release date has reportedly been leaked on the PlayStation Store. I did see video of during the Steam Game Awards. Yeah, I guess there's a real danger of calling them the Steam Awards when they really weren't the Steam Awards. Obviously, Valve has its own little Steam Awards. It could very easily have a presenter and compete with the Game Awards if it wanted to. But yeah, they showed off footage of gameplay of Street Fighter 6, whether or not it actually is coming out June 2nd. And it, again, just does not look like a Street Fighter game for me. A Forspoken demo looks to be announced imminently. Yes, they put out more footage of Forspoken, and that was kind of an example, I think, of a game that was hyped very much in the audience, and there was a lot of whooping and hollering for it, and very little interest in the chat. Like, now really would be a great time to do polls. Like, if I was a bigger YouTuber, like, I should have been doing polls and doing potentially a live stream while watching their live stream to just like poll my audience as far as, hey, are you interested in this game, or yes or not? Because yeah, I could see PewDiePie, if PewDiePie was really even a video game streamer anymore, putting out polls and saying, hey, everybody vote, are you interested in Forspoken? Are you interested in Judas, which was the game that was announced? Just exact same poll each time to get a real feeling of what actual gamers are hyped about. Let's see. Moving on with the news, Ubisoft's Immortals Phoenix Rising is coming to Steam soon. Which, okay. Like, this is one of those games I think that probably would benefit at a lower price tag than its original release. I can't even 100% tell you what kind of game Immortals Phoenix Rising is. It looked like it was going to be a Kid Icarus ripoff clone, but I don't know if it really played that way at all. Looking at this, you almost think it would be a Breath of the Wild Genshin Impact type game. Let's see if we can see. Now you see these big, interesting environments. And then you're seeing a lot of cutscenes and a lot of costumes. But the actual gameplay seems to be more of a hack and slash action fighting game with some puzzling elements. A stylized open world, it says. Yeah, that could be somewhat like a Breath of the Wild game. Shiny Pokemon and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are spawning behind walls. Yeah, they put out a patch. There's still, I think, a lot of bugs. And I listened to the Non-Tendo podcast, which is something that I'm thinking about listening to when it happens. It's not happening that frequently. And I think one of the contributors said they were going to straight up not make any content at all for December. And inherently what they were saying is that you would have to just rebuild all of Scarlet and Violet to really fix the core infrastructure problems that exist in Scarlet and Violet. Like, little tweaks, little cheats here and there will help, but only so much. So obviously we don't need to go over articles that say how to watch the Game Awards live stream. The options were fairly wide in that you could watch it on the official YouTube channel, which I'm not sure how many people have subscribed or even know about the Game Awards official YouTube channel. You could have watched it on Steam.tv and potentially won a Steam Deck, or you could have watched it on Twitch.tv or Twitch.com. I don't even know if it's Twitch.tv or .com, come to think of it. And if you watched a significant portion of it on Twitch, you would have gotten, I think, an Among Us skin as a Game Award So inherently, if you wanted everything, you needed to have opened it both on Steam.tv and Twitch and watched it twice. I will also point out that this screenshot here is probably from a previous year, and I think there's considerably more people here in this event center than I ever saw this year. Like, I only really saw rows going about 4 or 5 people deep, and I'm not sure that it was even that wide. Like, I also saw people still wearing masks at a fairly high number, employees and people in general. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some SAG-AFTRA rules around that, or just because people are still trying to avoid COVID, which is a good thing, certainly, if they don't want to get sick. I'm not going to shame them for wearing masks. There were also 2 prominent female presenters at the Game Awards, or one presenter and one award winner, and they both had fairly awful, yeah, this is nothing like what it looked like this year. These are all clips from last year. They had really awful clothing. Most people not really professionally dressed up. Jeff Keighley, the presenter, in a suit, but even in that, kind of a laid-back suit. The God of War voice actor in a very striking, perhaps better described as hideous, gold suit. Like it was almost certainly too high fashion for something that's trying to be respectable. You do have the problem of this trying to be the Oscars of video games, and then video game developers just not having like classy fancy dresses, instead having weird fancy dresses. Same is really true for the guys too, is that they don't have classy outfits. Although, as far as compared to the Oscars, I really would love the Oscars and watch it a lot more if they had trailers for movies coming up in the Oscar presentations. I would like the Super Bowl more too if they had in their commercials flashbacks to plays of the season, and you had like a flashback to things that happened in the previous season by different teams, but they don't do that. I guess that might cause some confusion, and particularly in the Super Bowl's case, you can't really show trailers for what's going to happen next season, like football is predetermined. But you could certainly have flashbacks instead of trailers. The next free title for the Epic Games Store is a mystery game. Which, okay. No real information there. Xbox claims it held off price rises as long as it could, but something had to give. Microsoft recently confirmed plans to increase first-party game prices to $70. Inherently, this is a couple of weeks after Sony announced that some of its first-party titles are going to be $70. So yeah, they didn't really do anything, and they are just raising prices and doing the same thing Sony is doing. Which is scummy. Particularly since now the FTC has come out and said that they are going to try and stop the Activision Blizzard merger. So it seems like they're raising money at a bad time for trying to save public face and not act monopolistic, possibly because they need more funding to fight the FTC. Part of the problem, though, is that they've effectively stripped any power away from they, I mean oligarchs, I guess in general, have stripped any power away from the FTC and the SEC to a point where any merger basically can always get approved, and nobody has a antitrust lawsuit that can succeed. Like the Federal Trade Commission in particular is going to have a hard time, and I think the SEC might have had a slightly better chance at suing them, but nope. The vote came down 3-1, where there was a rumor it would have been 2-2, with there being it's terrible to break it down this way, but that it was reported that there were 3 Democrats and 1 Republican, so almost certainly you would assume in that case that the 3 Democrats all voted against the merger and the 1 Republican voted for the merger. Although, I mean, that breaking everything down by Republicans and Democrats is stupid, because both Democrats and Republicans are pro big business way more than anything else. So it does seem like it is going to go to a court case, but they kind of, I'm sure, knew that. And that certainly would line up with the idea that they weren't handing out concessions at the beginning here, if they knew that the that they probably knew that they were going to end up having to fight it in the courts, and so they didn't want to lose leverage by giving too many concessions. Here's a story. Diablo 4 developers reportedly say crunch feels necessary, claiming lengthy mismanagement. Current and former staffers have also spoken about alleged disturbing script changes. Well, what does disturbing script changes mean in case of a Diablo game? Are they making it more demonic or evil in the script, or are they making it more woke or less woke? I mean, like, what in the world could that mean? I mean, it really could just mean anything. Like, part of Killer 7, which it's Killer 7 as I'm playing it, really is just an amazing game. There's real freedom of speech to say whatever they want in their art without there being any seeming pushback at all from anybody else. Suda51 totally able to have like a disabled character sexually assaulted and physically abused multiple times, and you just never see that in most forms of art or media. And then also on top of that, there's a whole subplot where you're chasing after a guy who's kidnapping orphans and harvesting their organs of the boys, and then being a creepy pedo with the girls. And they just make that narrative and that story point extremely clear. There is a point on that level where you're chasing after that bad guy that the only characters you really see is more of what you would assume is kind of like a 18-19-year-old character who may have been even older, that had a big anime head over her like an anime mask. And then at the very end you see like these corpses that have their organs harvested far off in the distance in the wall, if you just happen to look to the left and right, and that's pretty much all it shows. But yeah, for a game that in its first thought is around suicide bombers and you're fighting against these kind of monstrous suicide bomber type characters. It definitely goes in extreme directions. You would expect a similar type experience with Diablo 4 and Lilith, is that she's got to be evil, she's got to do bad things. So that's pretty much what you would expect from a Diablo game. Most people who are concerned about the quality of Diablo 4 are completely concerned about monetization and just the gameplay mechanics. Yeah, the extensive report from Washington Post states the game's release is planned for June 6, 2023. The report also includes testimonies from 15 current and former employees who are speaking under anonymity, claiming that it will be difficult to release the game on this date unless they work significant overtime. So yeah, Activision Blizzard's still very much in that mentality of crunch. And crunch particularly right at the launch window, which isn't out of the norm still. Like, it's going to be a long time before we get to a point where there's zero overtime or zero crunch, and calling all overtime crunch is perhaps too much of an exaggeration. But yeah, it's going to probably be at least a decade before it becomes even close to 51% of video game companies not having overtime to make release dates and release windows. In most jobs, if there is a release date, the release date is not very well decided and accurate, and people have to work overtime to make those dates. Let's see, according to some employees speaking to Washington Post, this new date seems final. Quote, we are at the point where they're not willing to delay the game anymore. One employee, quote, says that. What's interesting here is that Activision Blizzard forcing that, or is that Microsoft forcing that? You'd have to assume it's still Activision Blizzard forcing it. Would it be a real problem if Diablo 4 was delayed 6 months to a year? Not really. Like, I don't. If they have the money to delay it, they should delay it. Make a better game. Diablo 3 is not as good as Diablo 2 in most people's minds. So, but yeah, that does seem like it would be nice if they really got back to Diablo 2 level quality or Diablo 1 level quality. Something that just people can love, even despite Activision Blizzard being attached to it. Here. Other claims in the article include an allegation that the creative director Sebastian Stipeth, I don't know how you pronounce that, who is the creative director of The Witcher 3 and head writer on Cyberpunk 2077, rewrote the game script when he joined the team in 2019, adding, quote, disturbing subplots about sexual assault. Okay. Let's just break this down. Does The Witcher 3 have a great story? Yes. Is there sexual assault in The Witcher 3? I think so. Like, almost certainly, I think some side subplot has that. If not that, there is definitely a subplot about a kind of magical abortion that is like one of the best parts of the whole story in the game, or a magical miscarriage, I think, more than an abortion. That's a major part of Witcher 3. And there is definitely a scene where a bad guy has like a woman naked and is tied down to a chair, and he's like torturing her and burning her with hot pokers, which maybe that's just physical assault, more than sexual assault, but okay. Now, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 is dripping with sex. I don't know if there is actually any sexual assault in that story, since I don't know the story. But I would assume that there's some level of that, certainly in some subplot somewhere. So it seems like that would be in line with reasonable scripts. Like, if Lilith as a character was sexually assaulted as one of the demons in Diablo, like, I guess the question there would be, is Lilith and or Diablo, were they ever humans that got turned into demons, or were they always demons? I think they were always demons. So, if anything, it would seem more like it would be a subplot with a secondary character. Inherently, the problem here is that somebody is saying disturbing like that's a bad thing. Disturbing is a good thing in art, and people, I guess, just have forgotten that. Like, we need disturbing entertainment in education and art in general. Like, everything would be very bland and boring if it was disturbing. I don't want to live in a saccharine sweet censored world where ideas cannot be expressed. Fictional ideas about fictional characters can't be expressed. According to the article, one of the versions of the script was referred to as the rape version because it repeatedly referred to the rape of one of the game's female love interests and referred to her as the raped woman in her character description. Employees reportedly had to plead with Blizzard leadership to change Stephanie's version of the story, and would reportedly repeat a line from a script, and then she was raped brutally out loud to each other in disbelief. Former employee told the Post, "Rape has no place in the Diablo universe. It's not a thing we should be tackling because it's a certain amount of nuance and a deft hand." I think it totally should be in the Diablo universe. You got a world that is full of demons doing all kinds of evil things. Like, it definitely should be tackled. And even if it's not tackled as well as in the writing as it should be, you're basically making an argument that rape shouldn't have been in the Game of Thrones series either. And it's like, no, that rape has always been a weapon of war in many, many conflicts, and the Diablo universe is a war between good and evil. The idea that evil of that kind wouldn't exist is ridiculous. And inherently, what this really just makes me think is that there are people on the staff working on Diablo 4 that want to make some kind of babyfied mobile game version of Diablo instead of making something that would age with the times and be the mature game series that it should be. Like, Diablo, even in its name, is not a game for kids, and not a game that's going to be bought for kids. Hopefully. Moving on, it's been confirmed that the FTC is suing to block Microsoft Activision's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. The lawsuit claims the deal could give Microsoft an unfair advantage, which is basically all they're going to say. As far as the armchair lawyers, and I don't know if I've seen any actual lawyers talk about this lawsuit, it seems unlikely that this lawsuit will succeed. That's what everybody was assuming even before the fact. In all fairness, if we look at these images, like, here's the games where sexual assault / rape makes some sense. Diablo? Yes. Call of Duty? Yeah, it kind of makes sense. StarCraft? Not really so much, because StarCraft has always been a more PG-13 type story, and more cartoony in its depictions versus like the dark grittiness of Call of Duty or Diablo. All that being said, the Queen of Blades is effectively like totally her body autonomy, I guess is what you would say, is taken away from her, which is very close to the active rate. As far as the Queen of Blades, I think her human form was called Kerrigan, so a human female character, of which there weren't that many in StarCraft, gets captured and mutated into a Zerg queen called the Queen of Blades. So, yeah, her right to choose how her body works and how she was depicted was taken away from her. So, you already kind of had that storyline. Would World of Warcraft make sense? No, because honestly, World of Warcraft is a lot more cartoony than this image really depicts, and a little bit more PG-13. Would Overwatch make sense? No, we already know that Overwatch is trying for little kids, and they didn't even like the fact that people liked the butt of Tracer, and that found that people are finding her attractive. And we can see in Overwatch 2 a lot of characters are just covered up in really bulky armor, so they're not being depicted as objects of desire. I'd like to make a joke and say Candy Crush. Yes, there should be rape in Candy Crush, but I can't think of a good joke for that, so obviously the answer to that is no. But there definitely is room for that topic to be touched upon, certainly. And if those topics are ignored and they're not talked about completely, then you get back into a Handmaid's Tale type world where things are just kept hidden and people are just kept in shame. It's certainly any individual real woman's choice or man's choice to talk about whether they've ever been sexually assaulted, but for the greater good of society, it would be probably better if more people talked about it and put the ugly face on it that it deserves. And I suspect in the fictional story of Diablo, they were going to try and put a very ugly face on it. They weren't going to try and glorify it or like increase a rape culture mentality of it being acceptable. Moving on. I didn't think I would be talking about rape this much today. Microsoft says it's ready for a court battle after the FTC sues to block an Activision deal. And I'm probably demonetized at this point for this video. Riot game titles are coming to Xbox Game Pass next week. Benefits details. Players can begin linking their Riot account to their Xbox profile today. So we got a lot of images of characters I don't really recognize. I know this is like Jinx from League of Legends, but I couldn't tell you what games these other characters are even from if they're not just all from League of Legends. Let's see, League of Legends World, or what is that? Valorant, League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics, League of Legends Wild Rift. Okay. So two of them are League of Legends games. American McGee gave some more hints as they were going over their design Bible. As far as who he seems like he's going to try and convince or make a deal with as far as a real video game company to actually make American McGee or Alice Asylum. I don't think it's actually going to be called American McGee's Alice Asylum. I think it's probably going to be Alice Asylum only. And one of the hints there was he said that he was going to go into the city, and he's in China, to talk with the company that he might make a deal with. which inherently that narrows it down to a small selection of Chinese game developers, more than likely, that he's going to try and do business with, which that may be a deal breaker in the first place, or that may let the game be created, but the game may not be that good. You're talking NetEase, I think, and Tencent, really, as far as companies. Unless some other company has sent in people into China in the middle of their whole COVID lockdown, zero tolerance policies, which maybe somebody who's rich and powerful, a CEO of a corporation, could sneak through into China, but I would lean towards assuming he plans on having either Tencent or NetEase, some Chinese company of some sort, make Alice Asylum. And that doesn't particularly bode the best, that it's not being sent out to more people. That being said, it's also not as much in the hands of American McGee as he likes to pretend, since EA owns the game and the IP. It's very possible that the design Bible just gets talks rolling, and then at some point EA says, you know, we're going to develop this, and we're going to develop it with our own internal studios, or we're going to develop it with a completely different studio than what you were thinking. Yep. I guess the question really would be, if I had time to do the research and wasn't so lazy, I would probably research whether EA has partnered with any Chinese companies before, and what companies have they specifically partnered with before. But yeah, it's still really not at a point where Alice Asylum is guaranteed to be made, or that anybody should get particularly hyped about Alice Asylum. Yep. Moving on with the news, Sony Bend has distanced itself from the Days Gone director's woke reviewers' comments. Bend Studios, the quote here is, Bend Studios does not share his sentiment, nor does it reflect the views of our team, which, if anything, I think that is the kind of perfect way to just respond when somebody says something crazy, and you're just not working with them anymore. In particular, he has a full wall of text. We are aware of the comments made by our previous creative director on Days Gone regarding his personal view on the critical reception of our intellectual property. Bend Studio does not share his sentiment, nor does it reflect the views of our team. Our studio is immensely proud of the work we accomplished on Days Gone, and are thankful to every developer who poured their heart and soul into it. We are incredibly humbled by the support of our Days Gone community, and we will continue to share our enthusiasm for our world and characters as we look toward the future of Bend Studio. So they really want to potentially make a sequel. Although, honestly, I don't think you could ever greenlight a sequel to this game when you've got such a grenade of a personality attached to it. I kind of would like to put on the tinfoil hat and buy into the conspiracy theory that mainstream video game journalists, and in particular woke video game journalists, are picking winners and losers, but honestly I just can't really believe it. I just don't think gamers really look at reviews that much, and their sentiment and their desire, I just don't think is really based around reviews. I think people are inspired to buy games by trailers and advertisements and what their friends are talking about, and what your friends are talking about is almost always inspired by trailers and advertisements, not reviews. Like, the only reviews that I personally look at that would even convince me not to play a game is reviews of people who actually have purchased and played the game on Steam, which is much more of a mob rule, democratic democracy type of rule as far as that. And what happens more often is a game needs 6 weeks to 6 months before I'd even consider playing it, and because I'm just not willing to pre-order and play games at full price. And inherently I think that's going to become more and more of an issue as prices go up for games, is that fewer and fewer people are going to be willing to play games at full price, and we're going to see sales numbers drop somewhat, and we'll see longer tails for games as they get to the 1 million units sold or 2 million units sold. But I guess I will go down the conspiracy theory thought, at least enough to say that obviously there are woke reviewers out there, and there has been one of the things that Gamergate was able to effectively prove and be successful at, which really wasn't that much, is that there are the word Discord like boards and chat messages and email lists, rings of contact between different mainstream video game journalists who were having a lot of woke SJW type conversations about games, which was causing for a lot of reviews to say the same thing and sometimes straight up conspire to not cover certain games. And see, that's just a bad policy in general. If I was running Giant Bomb, certainly, and I know at least 2 of the people at Giant Bomb were in one of those email lists, I would say, no, you absolutely cannot be contacting and talking to your peer reviewers about video games or anything else. Like, everything in your head is as far as reviewing video games, is property of Giant Bomb, and you should have your own unique opinions and thoughts and not seek outside validation or try to synchronize ideas. Now, on a practical level, maybe there is some element in which you would contact other reviewers on other sites to say, hey, are you having the same kind of bugginess issues that I'm having? But that inherently makes an assumption that's not really even true, that Giant Bomb and most mainstream video game journalists are even talking about bugginess problems in their early access versions of games, which mostly they don't talk about it, which is shown even in like the Callisto Protocol reviews that have come out recently, is that, or the Pokemon reviews that have come out recently, is there's just not a real concern around the bugginess, because they are sold a line of goods that it'll all be fixed in the day 1 patch, whether or not that's actually true. One thing I guess we'll have to check later, because it's not out yet, is the Steam Awards winners, which they had only 5 or 6 categories for the Steam Awards. But I do think Valve is not moving fast enough, Steam's not moving fast enough towards the idea of really making that an actual award event. One thing Steam could certainly do is have an award every month and highlight a lot more games. So if there was just a game of the month under certain categories or just a game of the month in general, that they could give out awards, if not just straight up a game of the week type award that would boil down the number of candidates for the Game of the Year awards a lot better, and Valve could automate the process of a Game of the Month experience every month, and then have a big end of the year show that could be fairly automated too. Yep, this is not going to work. Let's see. Returnal has been finally confirmed for a PC release, which I would have sworn it was already for PC, but I was extremely confused as to why there were Returnal ads at all being shown in the Game Awards, and I guess this is why. Noticeably, there was also another game that looked very much like Returnal that was announced, and yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this new game somewhat eats the lunch of Returnal PC because of just that long delay. And the roguelike nature of Returnal I don't think quite works. Street Fighter 6's release date has been confirmed for June. Do we have an exact date? June 2nd. We'll leave it at that. A Dead Cells X Castlevania crossover DLC, Dead Cells: Return to Castlevania, is coming in 2023. This is the largest, most ambitious DLC for Dead Cells yet. I wouldn't be 100% surprised if what the DLC actually is, though, is just the layout of one of the Castlevania castles. Probably Symphony of the Night, if I was to guess. With the Dead Cell character running around it, and that there really isn't going to be a lot of new Castlevania content in it versus what people have already seen in Symphony of the Night or whichever Castlevania it's based on. It could also be even less exciting than that, in which you are actively just going to be able to play as Alucard, or not Alucard really. Who would you play as? A couple of the characters that are in Castlevania, a couple of the heroes. Probably should stop playing this Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. Like, we're now 30 minutes in, and there's just going to be a lot of news. We're still going through the Video Games Chronicles articles. Plus, there's just going to be a lot of opportunity to talk on this Friday. Let's just go and summon this. All the victories we've had today have been around the idea of scaring people with Flowandries more than actually winning with Flowandries, which does seem like that is the way you really play that deck. As someone who hasn't played Hades 1, I have no idea who this character is, but there definitely was a reaction when people saw this character, or particularly saw this character with a one red eye. The trailer had a late title card to say it's Hades 2. This character seems to be fighting and playing a different role than the character in Hades 1, trying to kill Kronos. Hades was talked about certainly a lot and very popular, so there almost certainly is a large amount of enthusiasm around Hades 2. Now, if you told me that this character actually is the same character as the one you played as in the Hades 1, and he's just transformed himself from being male to female, alright, I guess maybe that happens in the story. Not knowing the story, it's possible. But that would be kind of hard to sell. So yeah. Feels like you should bring back the first character somewhat, just to show a connection. But yeah, again, or you should probably have a recap trailer to catch people up as to what happened in the previous game. I am going to start apparently taking damage. It's a tribute. No, tribute 2 instead. Taking this one and this one. See, at this point, you would think now would be the time for them to give up. But apparently not so much. Now see, if this guy had an ability where he could attack each character, I would lose. But nope, he didn't even go for the weakest character on the field. Maybe there's some strategy around that. Go and set that. Go and set that. Go ahead and set that. Let's see, if I was to take like this, that wouldn't work. So if I was going to summon this, I would basically be summoning 3000 with 4. I don't think that's the way to go. It's way smarter probably just to attack here. Go and toss a card. Just to do more damage. And then at that level, I guess the question is, would there be a level 2 thing I could summon here? Not really. Let's see. The company headed by Ken Levine, the creator of BioShock, which, like, I don't know how much of his contribution I mean, his story ideas then with Bioshock 1, I think were pretty good, but I think this game, Judas, that he's announcing, might really highlight that he is kind of in a rut as far as mental ideas. Like, he basically was just ripping off Ayn Rand. Anyways, so I'm gonna say no to that. So yeah, I think the teams behind the Bioshock games, as far as getting the good gun in one hand, magic ability in the other hand, are still probably pretty good. But it is also worth mentioning that Ken Levine in particular really struggled to, yeah, let's go out on that victory. Really struggled to have Bioshock Infinite be as good as it is, and it honestly I think could have been a lot better. And there was a lot of delay around that, and there was a lot of ideas and promises that were kind of made around the Bioshock Infinite teasers and trailers that actually weren't delivered on. Not really in the best of places as far as daily quests go. Didn't special summon or synchro summon or XYZ summon anything, so probably should just play off screen. So looking at this trailer, you have a very brightly colored character with torn, ripped clothes a little bit, and they have this kind of magical thing in the back of their hand to give the magic. And then there's also weird statues. Actually, in this case, I think it's, I don't want to look at every single trailer for every single game, but I think in this case it probably would benefit to show this off. So Ghost Story from the creator of Bioshock is already what they're selling it as, and it very much seems like they're just going even wilder, like inherently. So there's the lady with her hand against the wall. Yeah, you've just got a lot of weird characters and a lot of weird visuals going on. Seems like it's going to be set in some kind of sci-fi space-like environment that I don't think is going to make the most sense at all. Like, it feels like what he's trying to make here is what if it was System Shock, but even crazy with craziness too. It really does just seem like the whole thing might be in a simulation with this logo too. That's another thing to think about. The subtitle is "Fix What You Broke." And at a certain level, I kind of wonder if this is just going to once again somehow try to be connected to the Bioshock universe, which that would be weird, since this one is just straight up Judas. But I could also see them calling it Judas, and then at the very end credits it being called Bioshock Judas, and only revealed at the end credits that it was in the Bioshock universe. Yeah, particularly I would, if I'm gonna throw any criticism out there, I think Ken Levine gets crazy ideas, and you see it in these visuals, and then his team has to work very hard to make a game that works around these crazy ideas. And in particular, they have to work doubly hard to make it feel like a Bioshock game, when this game Judas very possibly could have just been a completely different style of game. At a certain level, it might very well be similar to the oh man, don't tell me I've forgotten the name of that game series. It's way too big of a name of a series for me to have forgotten the name of it. Keep thinking Psychonauts. That's not the series I'm talking about. The Gearbox series with Tiny Tina. Borderlands, yeah. Yeah. Can't believe I forgot Borderlands. It could be very much like the Borderlands idea, in that Borderlands, if you stripped it out and made it look like just a regular Call of Duty game, it still probably would work pretty well as a RPG light run and gun shooter. Any Ken Levine game probably would work well as a System Shock clone. But then Ken Levine comes in and puts his crazy visuals and story as an extra on top of it. And in the same way that Borderlands put in their crazy visuals and comic book style skins in Borderlands. And maybe Ken Levine at this point has been just relegated to the crazy ideas, and that's why we see crazier ideas here than normal. There's just a lot of weirdness there. And that he isn't really touching the gameplay mechanics, because I think that's where he's worse, where he's throwing out ideas of gameplay mechanics that when that's not really what anybody wants. People obviously just want more Bioshock. There is also Atomic Heart that has to be a contender here, because Atomic Heart, even though they probably are lying or were at least lying about what they had to offer with that first trailer a couple years ago with Atomic Heart, they have painted themselves into a corner now where Atomic Heart really is going to have to come out and be this weird alternate reality Russia Bioshock clone. And the weirdness of Atomic Heart seems to be directly influencing the weirdness of Judas here. And very possibly maybe Atomic Heart had seen some of these internal developments and was internally stealing ideas from Bioshock Judas. But you could also make the exact opposite accusation with no evidence. I point out that maybe Judas is stealing Atomic Heart's idea. Regardless, you've got two games now that are going to be released within the same 3 or 4 year window that are fairly weird, and I'm not sure that we need that many weird looking games. Although at a certain point, maybe all games will just get weirder and weirder. That's may just be the way things go forward. This might be a style that people actually cosplay at some point, and at some point cosplay may actually just become normalized. They made a big deal about this. I don't know why you would want to make a big deal about this at the Game Awards, but Kevin Conroy is going to play, I think, an evil Batman in the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game. I think the general idea is that all of the Justice League is being brainwashed by somebody to be evil, and the Suicide Squad are somehow the good guys trying to beat the entire Justice League. Kevin Conroy was the Batman voice actor. He's not Japanese. He was the Batman voice actor who died very recently, but I feel like you probably would have wanted to recut this trailer and just say, yes, Kevin, we have the last voice acting in a video game of Kevin Conroy, but you probably don't want to try and sell your game based on that, which is basically what the trailer felt like it was trying to do. Is it was trying to capitalize on the untimely death of a voice actor instead of saying saying something different. What you need to do on this is if you're going to show this trailer, they needed to have said, they needed to have some talking heads talk to the screen, talking about Kevin Conroy and how much they loved him and how good he was to work with and how awesome he was and how he'll be wholly missed. And then show the trailer. And since more than likely the Game Awards is selling every 30 seconds or so of trailer time for millions of dollars, you probably should have just had some talking heads talking about Kevin instead as your trailer and say, this is our last minute replacement, and if you want to check out the trailer, check back in a few weeks to see this trailer, because now is not the time to capitalize on someone's death or try and use a thing, or check out this link right now to watch it. But they didn't do that, and yeah, it came off awkward, to say the least. There should be some in memoriam section in the Game Awards, and yet they didn't do that. Like, when it happens, almost certainly somebody is going to die every year, so it wouldn't be terrible to do an in memoriam section and just name people who have passed who have worked in the video game industry. This was the biggest surprise, and frankly, there were very little surprises at the Game Awards as far as the announcements. There were announcements of games I've never heard of, certainly, but they're not surprising because I just kind of expect there to be announcements of games. In fact, it's a little surprising that, like, Ghost Story Games and Ken Levine have taken this long to put out a teaser trailer or at least give a name to what their next project would be. But they, in the wake of completely not mentioning and ignoring the controversy that sprung up around Bayonetta 3, they have very quickly announced a Bayonetta prequel called Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon, being released in March. They're pushing it out very quickly. I wonder if the controversy maybe rushed it, or maybe this was the plan all along. That being said, Bayonetta Origins almost feels like it is the beginning of a whole different series that is a different type of game. More of a top-down hack-and-slash game, less of a third-person perspective hack-and-slash action game. I wouldn't be surprised if there's no scoring in Bayonetta Origins games and no major combos you have to learn, and it really, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a game that you really have to practice or get really good at to get everything unlocked in it. And inherently, if they're locking down the idea of a potential series of games that are prequels to Bayonetta, they're doing this with the assumption that Bayonetta is going to be more in her like little girl form than in an adult form. So you're probably losing the sexy demon hair concept. Like you can see here, she's not being depicted super young, but yeah, this is not demon hair that she's wearing either. Cereza was the original name of Bayonetta before she lost her mind or memory. Yeah. They already went in an alternate dimension narrative, spoilers for Bayonetta 3, so at any point there could be any kinds of other spin-offs in the Bayonetta series, but it does seem like they want to take the character who is beloved with Bayonetta and have this new team that seems like they struggled somewhat with making Bayonetta 3, and they want to make different types of games around Bayonetta, which I can't hate that idea. Really, is this going to load or not? Man, VGC is just really bad about that. So here you have Bayonetta in her adult form being shown, just as she was in Bayonetta 3, and then you see it turns into a book and it flips back to the beginning. Now, it's only if you haven't played the first game, spoilers for the first game, the little girl that you're thinking might be Bayonetta's daughter turns out to be Bayonetta brought to the future. So we've already seen Cereza as a little girl. There definitely seems like this is more of a adventure platforming game. And it seems to me like your cutscenes are going to be fairly cheap in that you are going to have this kind of comic book story here. Like, Bayonetta kind of needs some backstory since she didn't get a ton of it ever. But she doesn't need a lot, really. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a 15-hour game at most. I wouldn't be surprised if this is very much trying to play towards the capabilities of the Nintendo Switch, whereas if Bayonetta as a series was actually on the PC, you would just be working on a Bayonetta 4 that would play exactly like Bayonetta 1, 2, and 3. It would be a little weird if this was a just permanent shift of the Bayonetta characters into a totally different gameplay style. The fact that it's subtitled Cereza and the Lost Demon definitely makes it feel like they want to do more of these. It also kind of feels like it should have just been like standalone DLC. Control Cereza and Cheshire to solve puzzles and fend off fairies. Yeah. So, definitely feels like it's going to have that fairy tale feeling. The Last of Us Part 1 is coming to PC in March. The remake of the 2013 PS3 game was released on PS5 earlier this year. This definitely puts me in a weird position, certainly. If this does come out to Steam, it may only be... nope, it's coming out to Steam and the Epic Games Store on March 3rd. It puts you in a weird position because effectively you're playing the remake or remastered version of Last of Us Part 1 with the slightly different visuals. I assume they're not porting the original version of Last of Us Part 1, which would have just been called Last of Us originally. But then you are just also in this weird position where you play the first game, you find it's amazing, and then I guess I'd have to just grow a spine and say I'm not going to play Last of Us Part 2, which I just don't think really is as much worth it. Although there's still, as a critic, reasons why you might play Last of Us Part 2. Generally, I would suggest if people are going to play Last of Us Part 1 on PC and that's the first experience, you should probably just stop at that point, because no matter how you feel about a lot of things about Last of Us Part 2, you're inherently turning the character that you grow to love into a character that you absolutely hate in Part 2. And arguably games should just not have Part 1s or Part 2s, and we haven't seen a game with a Part 1 and Part 2 in a very long time previous to this. Star Wars Jedi Survivor gets a March release date and a new gameplay trailer. Check that out at Video Games Chronicles if you're interested. This character here does not really seem like the same character as far as a face as Fallen Order, but maybe it is, and he just has a different haircut. I'd have to double check. So yeah, Death Stranding 2 has been confirmed. There's a trailer there. There's a real focus on this character, whoever she is. Here you can see Jeff Keighley. He's kind of in like this velvet suit. Yeah, that's kind of what I would say. Kind of like in this velvet jacket. And he's like the best dressed person in the whole event. Really. I think Reggie Fils-Aimé was pretty pretty well dressed too, and Doug Bowser's pretty well dressed. There are other well dressed people, just a lot of really badly dressed people too. A new Nightingale trailer has shown more of the game in action, which Nightingale is a weird survival game where you are transporting to different worlds, almost like Myst, except for with survival elements and far more action and no puzzles. A new Tekken 8 gameplay trailer has been released. You want to check that out. A Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores DLC has been announced, and Horizon Forbidden West was set in the future of our world. So here you can see the Hollywood sign, old and being demolished. Seems like you're going to be able to fly around too. Horizon, still kind of a rough series, but maybe it could continue to hold people's attention. Diablo 4's release date has been confirmed for June 6th specifically. Part of the problem, as much as I think Lilith is an interesting looking character in the way she's been depicted in trailers, I'm not sure if she's going to be that interesting in the way she's actually depicted in the game. But part of the problem, certainly with Diablo, is that you fight Diablo in Diablo 1, and then I think you fight Diablo again in Diablo 2. And if you do fight Diablo in Diablo 3, you have to fight several of Diablo's sibling demons first. And I don't think I ever actually got to a Diablo. And Diablo 4 runs into that same problem, is that they really want you to go through a very long narrative journey in these later Diablo games, whereas I'd like the Diablo games to honestly be shorter in the narrative and just more replayable, since there are so many different classes. Like Diablo basically created, or was one of the first ones to use the idea of multiple classes in Diablo 2, and even Diablo 1. But even at Diablo 1 and Diablo 2's space, the games were too long in their narrative that you would really want to play as more than one or two classes. But yeah, I definitely think if your game's name is Diablo only, you should probably have Diablo show up. But I'm willing to overlook it because it's such an old game series, and if it was named today, it almost certainly would be some longer title like Origin of Evil, Diablo. Crash Team Rumble, a team versus team Crash Bandicoot game, has been confirmed. I don't even think I saw this announcement. Company of Heroes 3 is coming to PS5 and Xbox. This was a traditionally only PC franchise, will be released in February. Do we have an actual date? February 23rd might be the date. Maybe not. FromSoft has officially announced Armored Core 6 Fire of the Rubicon, which this is another one that I must have been asleep at this point as far as the announcements go. This is the first Armored Core to come out in more than a decade. Looks like it's a robot mecha game. And yeah. Inherently, this is a problem. It is just so much easier to look at trailers individually and pick and choose what you're interested in looking at a trailer than it is to sit through a whole, even 45-minute long presentation of the Game Awards. It really just highlights that the idea of doing a Game Awards presentation and making it like a TV or a movie experience is outdated. It's just an archaic way that's not that useful. Steam TV certainly could have been better around that, where each trailer could have unlocked, and you could have gone back and watched that trailer in a second window on the same page as you're watching the live presentation, and do a whole picture-in-picture thing. The whole idea of picture-in-picture has been forgotten about with streaming apps and streaming services, basically. Even on Android, they've updated the way the audio plays in such a bad way where I can't have the audio playing on two things at the same time, which I know that sounds insane, but I'm ADHD enough that I can actually multitask and have something playing audio and have another thing playing audio at the same time. And I'm rather peeved that an update in Android now fades out the audio of one thing before the next thing starts playing. It's particularly annoying when some website tries to play audio and then it pauses the background podcast I'm listening to. Need to hurry up here. Alright, well, this looks intriguing. Definitely looks like it's a mech game. It's from Bandai Namco. One of the things that I've realized as I've been watching more and more gacha crane game players playing crane games in Japan on YouTube, just watching other people waste their money, basically. A significant amount of the gacha machines and crane game machines and just like the items in the gacha machines are labeled with Bandai on the name. So Bandai is just one of those big Asian companies that has their hands in every pie they can possibly be in, and they seem like they are heavily making profit on gacha games and gambling on top of just making video games, which would explain why a lot of Bandai video games don't seem as much of a focus for Bandai Namco. Same is true for Sega. Sega had a lot of pachinko places before the pandemic, and maybe now Sega can't make profit off the pachinko places as much, so they're back to trying to make video games with Sonic Frontiers. Yeah. Moving on, Final Fantasy XVI's release date has been confirmed. Do we have a thing? It'll be on the PlayStation 5 on June 22, 2023, and it will be exclusive at least until December 31, 2023. So I guess if you absolutely have to play Final Fantasy XVI, you're gonna have to play it on a PlayStation 5. That being said, it's not like there's a lot of enthusiasm around Final Fantasy XVI, really. It definitely is coming up more as one of the dud games in the Final Fantasy series, being in its medieval fantasy world, and being just kind of criticized as not looking that interesting, on top of the whole we can't have any black people controversy, which is maybe more of a non-controversy. Generally, I think the problem here is I just don't think people think this is what Final Fantasy looks like at all. While this may be what Final Fantasy looked like in the old days of Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Final Fantasy 14 and 13 and 7 all had more of a sci-fi futuristic look to them, or at least a present day look to them. They just really haven't been as medieval fantasy as this looks. And arguably, I think it's a mistake nowadays to say, well, Final Fantasy can be anything we say it is. I think Final Fantasy needs to break itself of that delusion, and it needs to be a serialized series with repeating characters and repeating worlds, and it needs to just say, look, we've just got to do things like other people do things, and stop slapping Final Fantasy on a random collection of games and hoping people won't notice. Inherently, what Final Fantasy means to Square Enix, I think, is that it is all using about the same gameplay mechanic and using about the same programming engine, and chocobos might show up. That seems to be the only consistent thread amongst the Final Fantasy games, is that they will have chocobos in them. Or if you look at like the Dragon Quest series, in comparison, almost every Dragon Quest game looks extremely similar to every other Dragon Quest game, and you know it's in the same universe. Moving on, let's see. Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty DLC will star Idris Elba, which I guess is this guy. I guess that's interesting if you're interested in Cyberpunk 2077. And then Elden Ring won the Game of the Year at the Game Awards, which this is noticeably the only one that Video Games Chronicle seems to have even bothered to announce. Yeah, here they talk out. Speech was followed by a bizarre moment when a member of the audience appeared to join the FromSoft's team on stage before grabbing the mic and shouting out his Orthodox rabbi, Bill Clinton. I didn't just dream that. Let's see. Amazon and Bandai Namco are bringing the anime MMO RPG Blue Protocol to the West in 2023. A closed beta for the game is scheduled for early next year. I wonder if this will be exclusive to people who have Prime Gaming to play Blue Protocol. Now, I've heard of several games with Blue in the title, so it'd be hard to know for certain which one Blue Protocol is. Looking at this thumbnail, though, I don't recognize any of these characters, and getting these videos to actually load. Let's see. It looks very much like a kind of Genshin Impact type animation style anime JRPG. I can't say this is the worst thought that Amazon may be thinking. Like, one of the JRPGs probably needs some level of support to come to the West, and I could see how Amazon Prime might try to have something more as far as their Prime gaming offering by bringing over something that could potentially compete with World of Warcraft. Like, in comparison, if Prime Gaming just always gave you a month of World of Warcraft credit, and so you could just continuously play World of Warcraft, that would probably be more appealing than Blue Protocol. But yeah, as far as their picks of Blue Protocol, that doesn't stand out particularly as the best pick. Alright, so the winners list here combined, which means this will help us skip any repeated announcements of winners list. Game of the Year was given to Elden Ring. Best Game Director, Elden Ring. Best Narrative, God of War Ragnarok. Best Art Directing, Elden Ring. Best Score and Music, Bear McCree, God of War Ragnarok. Best Audio Design, God of War Ragnarok. Significant pattern you're noticing here. And yeah, I get why you wouldn't want to just have the same person come up and get 5 different awards because of that. But it did create this odd imbalance. It almost seems like what you probably should do, and this would be at least a little bit different, is just keep them seated at their seat, or have them stand up at their seat, and have a presenter walk down and hand the award to the person and hold a microphone in their face, because then, yes, that would have people grabbing the microphone and that would look bad, certainly, but it also just saves on the time of having a whole group of people walk up to the stage and then give this long speech like they own the audience and that they should do long speeches. It would be fairly easy to pull the microphone away from somebody more with a presenter presenting the awards. It honestly would also help with just like people walking in general. Yeah, eventually we're going to get to the point where there's somebody in a wheelchair that deserves an award and isn't going to awards shows to receive the award because they can't get up the stage. Moving on. Let's see, where were we? Best Art Direction, Elden Ring. Best Score and Music, God of War Ragnarok. Best Audio Design, God of War Ragnarok. These really are just awards that they would use to put on their Game of the Year version. I think, yeah, these people do deserve to win awards, I would agree, but for a consumer, for a game player, I'm not sure I really care about the best performance going to Christopher Judge for God of War Ragnarok. Games for Impact was given to a game called As Dusk Falls, which I couldn't even tell you what that looks like as a game, so it would probably just be better to click that and see. You can see here a 2 out of 5 star review from Video Games Chronicles, saying it's an engaging story let down by its mechanics. And that's the Games for Change award, or Games for Impact award, which probably shouldn't be a category because it's too subjective and too controversial. Best ongoing game given to Square Enix, Final Fantasy XIV, which that's our first Japanese company winning anything, and Square Enix almost certainly not allowing any of their employees to receive awards, so that would have been one of the landmines. Stray was given Best Indie Title. Best Debut Indie was also given to Stray, which maybe you don't need 2 categories if that's what's going to happen, or you don't give Best Indie to Best Debut Indie. The problem here is the word debut in video games doesn't mean a lot. A lot of indie people are going to be debuting their first game, and a Best Indie game almost certainly is not going to go past 12 months. So it's not like next year Stray would win Best Indie. So yeah, they needed to get rid of the word debut and just have a Best Indie. Best Community Support presented by Discord, which this is just a sponsored giveaway to Square Enix again, which, yeah, there again you run into a landmine. Best Mobile Game was given to Marvel Snap for its competitors. That's a fine choice. I might slightly disagree with it. They're not listing the actual competitors here. Best VR and AR game was given to Moss Book 2, which I'm not sure actually came out this year. And that's a PlayStation third-party title. So maybe that would have been a landmine too, as far as PlayStation not being involved. Whereas Best Action was given to Bayonetta 3, and that would have been Platinum Games / Nintendo, and Doug Bowser came up and accepted it and then read a short note from Platinum Games, which I guess is a way, maybe not the best way, to have a Japanese team accept a Western award. Best Action Game went to Action Adventure Game went to God of War. Best Role Playing went to Elden Ring. Best Fighting Game went to Multiversus, which, yeah, I don't know if I really agreed with that one. Best family game went to Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which this was one that I think didn't have Doug Bowser coming up, and that creates the weirdness where you had Doug Bowser from Nintendo of America. He could have gotten up and gotten this award. Maybe he did get this award, but he didn't get up for another one. Yeah, I don't think he got up for Splatoon and said anything, and I don't think anybody was present to receive Mario and Rabbids Spark of Hope for Best Sim Strategy. Best Sports Racing was Gran Turismo 7. Best Multiplayer going to Splatoon 3, which that really put a nail in the coffin as far as Call of Duty Modern Warfare or any militaristic first-person shooter. Looking at these awards, you'd think those Gamer Bro games like Halo and Call of Duty weren't even being played. And by the people who voted on these games, they probably weren't being played. Most anticipated, given to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. The best content creator of the year was Ludwig, whoever that is. Best adaptation was Arcane League of Legends for Netflix, which I guess that category probably should stay. Innovation and accessibility went to God of War Ragnarok. Again, maybe a little bit not of an unnecessary award, but whatever. If they want to give innovation and accessibility awards, fine. Pat themselves back on whatever ridiculous accessibility features they've added to games that don't actually help anybody, which I think is the case a lot of times. Best esports game was Valorant. Best esports athlete was Jacob Yaw Whittaker of Cloud9. Don't know him. Best esports team was Loud. Best esports coach was Loud and Valorant. And see, it would have made some sense if some of these esports people were the people in the audience and one of them somehow got on stage. And arguably, that's probably the best argument around not having esports awards. In the first place, esports awards in general just don't feel like they are in line with all the other awards being given out, since every other award in here is around somebody making a game, not playing a game. And esports is just not really going anywhere. It's becoming like an actual thing, as much as people have tried to promote it. So yeah, I would cut all the esports awards and then give more actual awards out to people. Yep. And then apparently the player's voice vote went to Genshin Impact, which that again is like the second more Asian company when you exclude Elden Ring winning all of its awards from Bandai Namco. Yeah, I guess that probably was the real landmine, is I didn't see anybody from FromSoft or Bandai Namco at the presentation. There's not a lot of diversity here as far as awards being given out, and it definitely needs to be a thought that only one game can win one award, and that there should be a tier of awards on there where, like, the game of the year, best game, would eliminate them from something else. So if you were the best VR game, for instance, that's a terrible choice, but that would probably mean you're not going to win Game of the Year. And then if you were the best game direction, that would probably eliminate you from Game of the Year, but that doesn't logically make the most sense, because something with the best game direction should be in contention for the Game of the Year. The categories are weird in general. Like, best action adventure game, again, probably should be in contention still for Game of the Year, so I don't know how you diversify this other than going back and looking at older games and giving out some awards for older games would be helpful. The Game Awards in particular should probably go most historically impactful, or some late late awards giving out a best action game, for instance, to Bayonetta 2 or Bayonetta 1, because the Game Awards didn't exist in the past, would be good. Like the most innovative game being given to games like Pong or Adventure for the Atari, because those would be really old games. There might be some relevancy around giving those kinds of awards. Moving on, 505 Games has revealed a star-studded co-op first-person shooter crime boss game called Crime Boss Rocky City, which I guess this wasn't at the Game Awards, or I was asleep at this point because I did not see anything about this. What's weird here is I think 505 Games is the one that was working on Halo Infinite, so why would they be announcing anything new? Let's see. It's in the works at the Czech studio in-game, so 505 Games is just like the parent company, and they've got this Czech studio in-game. These are people who previously contributed to Mafia, Arma, and Silent Hill series, among others, which is all over the place. Part of the problem, though, whenever you have a game that has like Michael Madsen, Chuck Norris, Danny Trejo, Kim Basinger, Danny Glover, Michael Rooker, and Damien Poitier in Vanilla Ice, that seems like you're spending a lot of your budget for characters for a game that probably doesn't have enough budget otherwise. There's also some controversy around some of these characters, like I think Chuck Norris is probably pretty right-wing, and Danny Glover I think is pretty old. Vanilla Ice is fairly old and probably not that relevant. It does seem like this is probably going to be a weird game and a simplistic, maybe even mobile game, and you're going to have the appearance and maybe some voice acting of the characters, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's just like no voice acting at all, and these people just license the appearance, likeness of characters. You could have not paid any of these characters and made parody versions of each of these characters anyways, and then that may have gone to a lawsuit, but they would have won the lawsuit anyways. And then you're also running into a high male to female ratio here of no less than 7 males to 1 female crime boss. Moving on, Transformers Reactive is a new co-op action game from Splash Damage. I kind of want to watch this again. If this was at the Game Awards, I was asleep at that point, and I thought I had caught up and seen everything from the Game Awards, but I must have skipped some stuff. Yeah, I'm not 100% certain when I fell asleep if my phone was still playing the video and I would have still been in contention for those minutes as far as winning a Steam Deck, but I'd have to be incredibly lucky at this point, or just incredibly deluded to think that I would actually have won outside of all of those bugs. And honestly, even if I had won, a Steam Deck 512 version is nice and all. It would let me do some setup and work on it, but I am very much more leaning towards a hope of a Steam Deck 2 being announced fairly quickly and reserving and purchasing that instead of the first generation. Well, I don't know what you're really looking for in a Transformers game, but I would say this is not what I would have thought a Transformers game looks like. With this, definitely feels more like a Michael Bay Transformers game than a cartoony, like kid-friendly Transformers game, which is really what I would be more interested in. Let's see. And then we have a second, all the major announcements rounded up. Which this probably would be a fairly long list, but instead it's just a list of other articles that we've already looked through that then would eventually lead to longer bits of information. The Media Molecule co-founder and art director Karim Utini, I would say, is stepping down. He'll move on from the Dreams and Little Big Planet Maker in early 2023. This guy's kind of muscly arms here. I guess I'm not afraid of wearing a pink shirt either. Does this mean anything to me? Not really. Like, somebody moving on. Okay. And then Modern Warfare 2 trailer reveals its first raid ahead of next week's release. I guess perhaps it's a case that Modern Warfare 2 just doesn't have any more trailers to show. And at a certain point, maybe just straight up commercials for games that have already announced themselves might be something that should be added to the Game Awards. Because there is not much action you can do on any of these announcements or trailers. Like you're making people dissatisfied with the games they potentially bought on Black Friday or are going to get for Christmas by putting out trailers before Christmas of games that aren't going to be out until after Christmas or 6 months to several years from now. So just regular old commercials for games that actually are available for purchase wouldn't be a terrible thought. I also say I don't like that the Game Awards just puts up the text world premiere. I think Microsoft's presentations where they have a voice actor going world premiere each time is more iconic and more interesting. Although that is a very small complaint. We have Modern Warfare 2 overtaking Elden Ring as 2022's best-selling game in the United States. Which I guess on the other hand, that might point out that they don't have to advertise. They don't have to run commercials. And they don't have to have an announcement at the Game Awards because Modern Warfare sells no matter what, apparently. Anyways, that was the last of the Video Games Chronicles articles. So now at the Gematsu articles, most of these will probably be redundant. So we did that one. Oh, here's one that wasn't, that the Video Games Chronicles didn't talk about. A game called Hellboy World Web of Weird, WYRD, has been announced for basically everything. It has that flat comic book style look to it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a turn-based game, but there might be something here. The problem with the Hellboy series has always been for me that it doesn't seem like there's a good way to get into the Hellboy series without reading the comics, and I wouldn't be surprised if this game still runs into that same problem. They're calling it a roguelike action adventure according to the tags. Let's see. Raw Furry is going to publish a classics-inspired horror game called Post Trauma for consoles and PC. Noticeably, this is doing the whole PT thing, having a game with the initials PT. I don't know if this is specifically that game that people thought was PT, but yeah, I don't think it is that game, because there was this controversy where Kojima said, no, I'm not in any way affiliated with this other game that looks like PT, which was a small indie game. What was weird about this trailer, and I'm not going to sit through it, is it seems like you're playing as this kind of fat, gray-haired old janitor character, which is just not something you usually play as, and he is just in this weird world / office. For a second there, I kind of thought you might be playing as like the janitor from Control, and that this would be some weird Control spin-off. At some point it might be part of that idea of monsters and the, what is it called, SCP Foundation. It might be that same theory, but yeah, as a character he's not particularly appealing, but in a horror game that's fine. If anything, that might make more sense. I also thought this might be one of the Silent Hill spin-off games, but that doesn't seem to be the case either. I'd say that those screenshots don't do it quite as good of a journey, and honestly, if I had more time, I really should just watch this. Yep. This looks very much like it is trying to be like a Silent Hill game or a Resident Evil 1 game, but it seems like it is keeping itself in its own universe, and yeah, doing its own thing, even though it is leaning on PT. That is certainly something I would never do if I was a game director. I'd be like, no, we're not going to have the initials PT just to remind people about a game that our game very possibly will never live up to. And I just feel like this old Japanese guy model is a mistake. Yeah, people are visually kind of selective and biased, and seeing an old Japanese fat guy is just not what Japanese people really want, and it's just not what I would want, and I don't think it's what many people want. In the same way that you don't see that many old fat guys in movies or TV, and when you do see an old fat guy like Brendan Fraser doing The Whale, he gets a bunch of awards and acclaim for being so brave to depict himself as a old fat person. Same was true for like Precious many years ago. The first-person puzzle adventure game Viewfinder has been announced for PS5 and PC, which is funny because I'm fairly certain they had already announced this game, where you take pictures and they expand out into a 3D world. So they go from being flat to being 3D that you can actually walk on and interact with. In a lot of ways it looks like it is taking some of the ideas of The Witness and taking it to the next level. And it could be amazing, although each individual gimmick and puzzle probably has to be fairly hand-coded. So it may not be that long. But yeah, it does look pretty amazing. But I don't feel like this is the first time this game has been announced, unless there was another game that was very similar to this, which I suppose there is a possibility that I'm just thinking of a different game. This definitely is a game, though, that you can only have a game like this once every 4 or 5 years at maximum, because it's just too hard to program, and if it became commonplace, it would lose its specialness, certainly. Atomic Heart has a new gameplay trailer. Atomic Heart definitely being the BioShock ripoff in a lot of ways, that now the game Judas is going to have to compete it with. And in a lot of ways, now having seen the trailer of Judas, this gameplay trailer feels downright normalized and just commonplace for the alternate reality robots gone amok Russia gameplay. I'm not sure Atomic Heart ever fully embraced the idea of magic. In the other hand, there is offhand something going on there, but it may not really be magic so much. But yeah, every time I see a trailer for Atomic Heart, it seems like it's more of a game and less of a collection of ideals or hopes. Hopefully that is the case. The game Scars Above launches February 23rd. This is the game that looked a lot like Returnal, and that very possibly is going to eat the lunch of Returnal on PC because of this delay. Yeah. Looking at this, half of these screenshots, you would just have assumed this was Returnal. They're on a different planet. Some kind of monolith teleported them, is the thought. You're getting guns. You're doing more puzzling and shooting and searching than Returnal, which is just a fast-paced roguelite. And this definitely feels like this is the kind of experience I would want compared to Returnal's gameplay. And when you actually do get into fights, you have big glowing targets on the backs, and those feel like boss fights and not just constant barrages of waves of enemies like in Returnal. I wouldn't be surprised if Scars Above's story is almost exactly the same as Returnal's story, and the gameplay wins it. Let's see, Private Division and Piccolo Studio announced a game called After Us for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, which this one looks like it is. I saw the trailer for this, but I don't know if I could even say what it was, really. Kind of looked like it was, you're this like mini fairy-like character platforming and puzzling, if I recall correctly. Let's see. Yeah, it's called a platformer adventure game. And these screenshots are just not really helping. So you see this like fairy-like creature in a like polluted world, and everywhere the fairy-like creature walks, they seem to be leaving a trail of some plants and life. And yeah, it kind of felt a little bit like that game Contrast, but it's probably not the best comparison. Definitely feels like it's going to be a game about pollution at some level. Just trying to bring life back or resurrect spirits of dead creatures. There's going to be some swimming sections, which might be a mistake. Let's see. A game called Replaced is a sci-fi futuristic action platformer. Let's see if we can. This was one of the presenters with her awful, looks like a bathroom floor rug dress. Another one of the receivers had like this green belly showing dress that almost felt high fashion, but really didn't. Let's skip around on Replaced. Some kind of side-scrolling platformer game, they say, but not really getting a lot of pictures of what it actually looks like. And since this is all blurred out, you can't really tell the art style here, which is somewhat different. It's more pixely. I don't think that it's not anti-A-list. It's A-list, I guess. That's what you'd say. More pixely on the edges. That probably was one of the worst, if not the worst, trailers that I did see, in that it just didn't really explain things. Street Fighter 6 adding DJ, newcomers Manon, Marissa, and JP. Although, in all fairness, the Street Fighter trailer 2 was pretty bad as far as what I would expect from Street Fighter 6. Noticeably, too, there's these weird, like, bottle-breaking karate chop mini-games and food rhythm games, which stuck out like a sore thumb. That's just not something I would have ever thought for a second would have been in a Street Fighter game. each of these characters probably needed their own trailers instead of having a trailer of like 3 or 4 people being shown off. Particularly since none of these characters are old characters. So Street Fighter 6 is very much trying to sell itself on its new characters in that trailer, which is not really how you would sell Street Fighter 6. You should be showing the original characters fighting new characters more. We already talked about Hades 2 being announced. It is worth pointing out, though, that they specifically said that it'll be due out in early access in 2023, and that they are just going to design the game by committee, and so that very possibly is going to create a situation where people who are playing it in early access love it quite a bit, but by the time there's a final version of the game, that fandom will have already moved on, and that final version of the game will just be drastically different, and maybe it'll be better, maybe it will be worse. I played somewhat recently, a game called Darkest Dungeon that had that exact same scenario where there was a rabid fan base of players in early access in Darkest Dungeon, and then when I played it after that rabid fan base had kind of moved on, the game really wasn't that interesting or that good. In fact, I found it quite frustrating, and eventually just had to give up on it as a game. I don't know if there is a good argument that Hades 2 should be in early access, considering particularly it is a sequel to Hades 1. That feels much more like it should come out as a full product. We don't need to talk about Judas again. There's really not a lot to talk about. Here we have a different picture of Cereza. And yep, you can see the Cheshire Cat, and this is very much kind of trying to be like an Alice in Wonderland without getting too close into an Alice in Wonderland thing. But yeah, you can see how Cesare here, young Bayonetta, has like these ballet type shoes on instead of the gun boots and the high heels, which would probably be inappropriate, although who knows if I'll leave it to you whether you think even ballet for kids is appropriate or ballet in general is appropriate. But then she seems to have high over the knee like thigh high stockings slash socks on, and then a little bit of a ballet dress, and then kind of flowing arm dress here, and then a big red bow, and her hair is up. They obviously are going for a completely different look from the Bayonetta we know, while still making her recognizable, and they're not trying to have a character here that is Bayonetta but smaller, which wouldn't really sell well. Almost certainly there won't be skins available in this game that show more skin or are lewd or revealing for Bayonetta as a character. I don't think Nintendo would allow that, nor do I think that would thematically make sense. That inherently is the problem, though, with this, is that you are trying to move Bayonetta, which should be really an adults-only game, into a realm of being a E for everyone game, and that just seems weird to do. It's like what they've done with Star Wars, though, and in all fairness, Star Wars has worked that way, where they have taken the original Star Wars movies, which would have been PG-13 to R rated, and they've babyfied it in like episode 1 for a younger generation, and then they babyfied it even more with the Star Wars Clone Wars type cartoons, and then they babyfied it even more with like the Lego Star Wars stuff, to the point where now Star Wars is definitely more of a Disney series, and when you have something like The Mandalorian, that is the one that stands out as being maybe a little bit mature. And I guess I don't inherently assume that a series or an IP can't have different versions for different ages. It just feels a little awkward. If there was a Mortal Kombat for little kids, Lego Mortal Kombat for instance, that'd probably be funny and interesting actually, but I don't know if that would really sell. Destiny 2 Lightfall expansion has a Gateway Game Awards trailer, which I must have been asleep again because I did not see that. A lot of these trailers literally pop up for like 15 seconds, and so you just blink it and you miss it. Last of Us Part 1 for PC, we already talked about. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, we already talked about. Honestly, the haircut on that guy just doesn't make it feel like it's in the Star Wars universe at all. A platformer from the Celeste creators that is due out in 2024 called Earthblade. It's probably a game that even if I had seen the trailer, I'm not sure I would have paid enough attention to it. These kind of Castlevania, Metroidvania looking platformers can be really good. I actually do remember seeing this platformer but not catching the name of what this was. Yep. And since this is from the creators of Celeste, I'm assuming this is going to play a lot like Celeste and be very focused on platforming. As we saw there, the character just ran away from somebody attacking them instead of encountering and fighting the person attacking them. A game called Dune Awakening has a pre-alpha gameplay teaser and trailer and screenshots, which pre-alpha literally means nothing at all, and basically these are concept arts for a game that has not even had a single line of code or committed to a single bit of animation. So that's stuff that's really too early to be showing to the public at all. For Spoken, we don't need to talk about Death Stranding 2. I don't think we really need to talk about more. There's going to be a focus on this like baby character, and here you have Gray Norman Reedus, so maybe the baby is his and hers. And then you see these enemies that seem to have like guitars that control some scanners, which, yeah, not really knowing the story of Death Stranding 1, I can't really say much about that. EA and Ascendant Studios announced a first-person single-player magic shooters called Immortals of Avium for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Did I see this one? That was a teaser. May have seen it, but as a teaser trailer, it may not really be showing much. Also, yeah, this weird like magical shield you can put up to summon other kinds of spells. If you told me this was going to be a VR game, I'd believe you. Yeah. Even Gametsu here can only really get 4 screenshots out of that video because there's not really showing anything. Tekken 8 story and gameplay teaser trailer and screenshots are available on Gametsu if you want to check that out. Let me see if I can do something here. Let's see. I'm just going to turn that down. I've heard enough of it at this point that I don't want to play any more in the background, so we'll just talk. Yeah. they need to swap out their music and get 2 or 3 different songs. And I need to have my own background music, frankly, instead of just relying so heavily on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel's background music. Nightingale's Realm Walker's Journey trailer and screenshots are available. Yeah, I guess this would be a great point to ask for feedback. Listen to me sit here in silence with no background music and tell me if you'd prefer me to just cover the news in total silence or if you'd prefer background music. Obviously, the best solution here would be to have different background music, multiple songs, but at the moment, I guess the preference is do you prefer nothing, or do you prefer the repetition of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and doing the same song over and over again? And I'll listen to any feedback there, although obviously the right solution is just to have more background music. I don't know how I'd really trigger that to automatically do that, though. Colossal Cave launches January 19th for the PS4 and the Xbox One versions coming out in Q1. So, I guess it's launching on PC on January 19th. This is the remake of a very old game that was just text-based called Colossal Cave. Yep. And obviously it's not just text-based now. That being said, I don't know if there's really that much of a game here if you have no nostalgia for it. I don't know if you really would want to play Colossal Cave. Historically, it's relevant enough for me to play it, though. Baldur's Gate 3 launches in August of 2023, which I guess makes another argument to potentially playing the Baldur's Gate series, although it is also, I think, fair to say that the Baldur's Gate series, if I am recalling correctly, has many spin-off games, so it's not just Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, it's like Baldur's Gate 2 and then another spin-off of 2 and another spin-off of 2. I was watching another YouTuber watch the Game Awards when this trailer came out, trying to find a YouTuber who would actually add some commentary themselves and some opinions. And while this YouTuber mostly didn't do that, he did mention, at least I think it's a he, that there was a small controversy around Baldur's Gate in that they actively came out and complained about characters. Like 90% of all the people playing Baldur's Gates were playing as just like a straight white dude type character after they spent a lot of time to have customized characters of other species and other appearances. And when you look at this trailer, you definitely are seeing a lot of variety of characters, certainly, that it seems like you can play. I believe the Baldur's Gate series is also like connected, I think, to the Dungeons and Dragons world, but seems like it's not made by Dungeons and Dragons directly. So, yeah. It was noticeable just how varied all the characters looked in this game. That being said, I'm still not sure if these cutscenes of characters really matter too much. And so there's like a Kratos type character crawling out of a mimic chest. There is certainly a point to that where if you make a character interesting, I think you'll get maybe 30% of male gamers to be able to play as a female presenting character. Uh, but there is just going to be some general preference as far as wanting to play characters that identify the same way you identify, uh, which that argument is made on both sides. Like women always are asking for, or woke journalists, I guess, they're always asking for women characters to represent other women, and yet when a male character wants to play a character that represents them, they are chided for that and said, no, you have to be more willing to play as whatever we say. Um, but the numbers don't lie, and certainly games, the argument has always been that a female protagonist does not sell as well as a male protagonist, and nobody's been able to produce any numbers recently to counter that argument, even with the exception of Femme Shepherd being fairly popular. I'm still sure a lot of people played as male Shepherd. But there is also a difference between a custom character and a bespoke created character by the actual creators of the game. And when you look at this game, this RPG game, Wayfinder, like these look like bespoke, custom created characters that will have backstories and characterization and voice acting. Whereas if you just gave me a generic character design to create, it would just I wouldn't be that motivated to play as some weird spider-like creature in a game. It is also worth mentioning that there's a lot of just stupidity, particularly in the case of Japanese companies, that it's not really a case of the Japanese companies being particularly stupid as much as they are just accommodating stupid requests. And so you have increasing numbers of games just lying about removing their gender options and instead having a type A, type B body models, which is fine if you just want to remove the word labels, but I guess don't pee in my soup and tell me it's gazpacho is an old joke saying. Like the truth of the matter is, most of those games that have a type B body model is just a female body model, and you still can't like take the shirt off and walk around topless on the type B body model, while you can often in the type A. And so that's really just getting rid of, doing a very surface level change to appease localizers more than anything, instead of either really embracing that or not really embracing that. If Conan Exiles, for instance, by default let you pick, like at the beginning of Conan Exiles, you pick a male or female body model, and if you were topless the whole time in Conan Exiles, where that would have been appropriate, and I think there probably was a mod that did that, that's where that kind of works. Noticeably, also in Conan Exiles, they had a whole genital size slider, and they tried to sell the game kind of heavily on the idea that you could make any kind of body models amongst the sliders you wanted, and that didn't really sell that many extra copies of Conan Exiles. At the end of the day, Conan Exiles mostly became a good game just with a lot of polish to it and actually having gameplay mechanics. Moving on, Fire Emblem Engage expansion pass announced. Includes 4 waves of downloadable content. Was this actually at the Game Awards that this was announced, or was this like totally separate? I think this was a separate announcement. I don't think there really were any Nintendo first or third party trailers at the Game Awards. So noticeably, uh, they were willing to accept awards and even have Doug Bowser show up and accept the awards, but they weren't putting any money or an investment into this. And in a lot of ways, I guess it's probably tit for tat, because I bet most Western game companies are not sending over their teams to the Tokyo Game Awards or the Tokyo Game Show. If there are any awards giving off at the Tokyo Game Show, I think there are. So it's just like a separate situation. Let's see. I think at this point we can come back and we can bring this up back again. Diablo 4 is launching June 6, 2023. It's going to be available in Standard, Deluxe, and Ultimate Editions. What's the difference? I don't know. Here you're going to have a character that you can custom create at some level. Although the character classes are still going to be the same, and this screenshot still seems to imply that there will be just a male model and a female model, and it's still doing the female armor, showing more skin. That's just what people expect, and that's just what people have known, and people have tried to break that mold, haven't really succeeded with any well-received things. Inherently, I just think people are not, the vast majority of people and gamers are not androgynous, and they don't want their characters to be androgynous or gender fluid. They're not mentally gender fluid, and they're not physically gender fluid. And that's just how people are. Sometimes you have to just accept people the way they are, instead of pushing the idea that everybody should be an androgynous, genderless, gender fluid thing. And I feel like now I'm putting on a MAGA hat, and as I say this out loud, and I'm not trying to do that, but you do have to admit reality, and like that is just a reality. Like, people are gonna like Lilith with her cleavage showing here somewhat, otherwise you wouldn't do that. Although the demon look of all the characters tends to be pretty black and pretty red, and noticeably this feels a little lacking in the red department as far as the outfits go, but not by enough to complain. We don't need to talk about the Burning Shores DLC again. Blue Protocol. Well, we might get a slightly better screenshot of what Blue Protocol is. Looking at that screenshot without actually playing the trailer, because I'm trying to save time here, this definitely has a feeling of a like 90s cartoon, something that was probably being animated by Japanese people, but not with any level of care or commitment, and not really targeting characters. The fact that you basically have a single color palette for each of the characters, although this one seems to be kind of orange and this one seems to be kind of a darker brown. At a certain point you would kind of expected the orange hair to be on this character and the brown hair to be on this character, but yeah, this feels very cartoony in its appearance. A game called Remnant 2 has been announced for the PS4, Xbox Series, and PC. It is a sequel to Remnant from the Ashes, due out in 2023. Is this a Dark Souls type clone? Or is this more of a Western shooting monsters game? There's a couple of Western shooting monsters games out there. Yeah, they say this is a third-person shooter, and I'm confusing I think some of them together. Yeah, this feels more like a Dark Souls type game, although it kind of has almost a feel of an enemy Evil Within Resident Evil type game. I guess it just is going to boil down to how it actually plays. Being a third-person shooter, it could be a lot more action-based than it seems. But yeah, it definitely feels like it's a Bloodborne, Dark Souls type game in appearance. But yeah, I'd say the shooting seems to be fairly fast-paced. That's one of the things that kills Killer 7 as a game, and if you were going to really remake it, you'd have to give some much faster guns, like SMG type guns, to the characters, because it feels like it should be a much higher action game where you're shooting a lot more bullets by pulling a right trigger instead of slowly shooting bullets by tapping the A button and then running out of bullets and reloading fairly quickly. Let's see, we don't need to talk about the Transformers game again. Company of Heroes 3 coming to PS5 and Xbox Series in 2023. We had already talked about that. Focus Entertainment and Don't Nod announced an action RPG called Banisher's Ghost of New Eden. And again, this must have been a trailer I was asleep for. It really has to be pointed out over and over here. It's just not beneficial to have this many trailers all together at the same time. This is all just turning into a big mess of trailers in my brain. All of these games, or the vast majority of these games, are not coming out in the next 90 days. There's going to be so many other games that are announced and advertised, and possibly in January and February there's going to be a little bit of a drought as far as announcements and trailers. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to just kind of wait and have your announcement in January when you have considerably less competition. This whole trailer seems to be fairly focused around doing a cinematic cutscene here and kind of nothing else, like banishing ghosts, which maybe this is an attempt at making something like a Witcher if you were just banishing ghosts and it was just a world full of ghosts. Which, in all fairness, there should have been rip-offs of Witcher 3. But they should have come out arguably a couple of years ago, or at least been announced a couple of years ago. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 launches in 2023, and it has some gameplay launch trailer. I don't think I really want to show off this trailer, but I do think I saw that there was going to be a female Space Marine, which I don't know if that even makes sense in the Warhammer 40k universe, but that did seem like that was something they were highlighting. Let's see if we can find that, or if I'm just completely dreaming that up. Yeah, I only really see this big blue male character. This feels like this is like a warrior style game in some parts where you're hacking and slashing with swords. I must have dreamt the female character, because yeah, not seeing it at all. I'm not Yeah, this probably wasting my time at this point just watching this trailer, so let's just leave it at that. I thought I saw a different character, but yeah, inevitably, if you are going to fall asleep halfway through watching all these trailers, you are probably going to end up dreaming something up. Like, this trailer seems solely focused on this one character. And it does kind of have this, like, Gears of War feeling with some Warriors elements to it. A game called Meet Your Maker launches April 4th. Release date trailer. Some kind of crafting PC game. That's what it's tagged as. The thing about this trailer is that it didn't, I think, really show any gameplay in it. Instead, you have this cutscene where you are doing multiple runs, multiple attempts to defeat enemies. And then every time you die, you have to start all over again. But otherwise, it's not really showing much of anything, so we'll leave it at that. Crush Team Rumble being announced for basically everything except for the Switch. Did we actually have a trailer on this? It's, I don't think, a Smash Brothers game so much as that it has that flat 2D plane on it. I think it's more of a 3D player versus player experience. Of course, you're getting a very team versus team appearance. No, it's more of an Overwatch game than anything, which, yep, since the Overwatch fan base really is probably young kids, having the Crash team make a Overwatch clone isn't the worst thought. The problem, though, of course, is these players versus player games never really last that long and never really succeed that well. The Lords of the Fallen gameplay teaser trailer is available. Yeah, we're having to watch a lot more of these trailers than I had hoped. I think a lot of these trailers just either weren't at the Game Awards, they don't seem like they have the right thumbnails to have been at the Game Awards, or they were just squashed between so many other trailers that where one ends and where the other began was fairly unclear. I think I did actually see this trailer, but I don't think I would have gotten the idea that this was Lords of the Fallen. Inherently, what the Game Awards did, and was a mistake, is that they announced 2 or 3 awards in one big bulk presentation, where it would have made more sense to play a trailer and then have Jeff Keighley on the stage, or some other presenter on the stage, going, what about that, folks? That looks amazing. Let's maybe not interview somebody who's working on that game or anything, but let's repeat the name of the trailer at the end, which they often don't do in these trailers, and just have a bit of a breath there, and then give away one award in the presentation, that if you're not going to have someone come up and give a speech, and then after one award is given away, go and show another trailer, and just have a little bit of a bumper there. We already talked about Rockay City, and we already talked about Phantom Liberty. We have about 5 more Gematsu articles. Armored Core, we already talked about. Wild Hearts, the Mighty Kimono trailer. Which, yeah. This was a Game Awards trailer again, and I don't know if I saw this at all. Part of this definitely is my own problem of just being an insomniac and falling asleep. Maybe being a hypersomniac and falling asleep too. This is that Monster Hunter type clone game with weird weapons, and it feels like it's trying to be a little bit Fortnite for some reason. Let's see, Final Fantasy 16 launching June 22nd. Game Awards winners announcements here. You can see how Gamatsu's article is way better than Video Games Chronicles because they're actually listing the other people who could have possibly won. And I could certainly go through this and say, well, Nintendo is more of a Japanese company, and that's why Xenoblade Chronicles didn't win Game of the Year, but I think Elden Ring obviously was the right choice. The nominations can certainly be highlighted as far as what Japanese companies were excluded as far as Japanese type games. Sony, technically a Japanese company, but God of War and Horizon Forbidden West, more Western games. But yeah, you can definitely see how Sony really needed to be included more in the Game Awards, or they were going to run into the problem that they ran into, where people are just not there to receive their awards. And it would be completely biased and unfair for Jeff Keighley to say all Sony Interactive Entertainment games are removed from contention because they wouldn't send anybody to receive an award, and yet Sony, by not having anybody there to represent them, managed to really mess up the Game Awards this year. And at a certain point, I guess that is an argument that Sony is winning right now amongst the consoles with their exclusives. Yeah, I could see how Genshin Impact here might have beaten Marvel Snap, but Diablo Immortal is basically a joke to even be on the list, and I don't even know what Tower Fantasy is. Best community support. I don't think Video Games Chronicle even had that one. But yeah, you can see there's a long list of nominations, each thing getting about 5 nominations. The best family game, for instance, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, is probably fine, but I could have also seen Lego Star Wars winning that. Noticeably, Nintendo Switch exclusives in this collection are this one, this one, this one, and this one. The only one that is on any other console is Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga, so Best Family was going to a Nintendo property no matter what. This is just so much better laid out just by using bullet points and bolding things. Does that matter really? That any of them got an award? Not really. That is the weird catch-22, is these awards, like the Oscars, like the Emmys, are totally just pointless. And then our final Gamatsu article says Crest has acquired Aqua Plus, which these are 2 companies that I do not even recognize. Very Japanese companies from the looks of it, and couldn't tell you what they actually worked on. Aqua Plus will become a subsidiary. Crest plans, develops, and sells video game software as well as master recordings of audio and visual content. Multiple intellectual properties that have been deployed across various mediums, such as the Utawa Romono series. I guess that's what is mostly connected to that announcement. Alright, so let's just very quickly burn through games that came out on Steam. Like, pretty bad time right now to have released your games. A game called Finger Bang, which you have finger guns. Kind of a funny joke game. For that reason, I might consider making a short around it, but that would be about it. Is this an adult game? Scroll down and see if there's an adult content warnings. Doesn't seem like it. This is one of those very long titled games. Seems to be a collection of like strategy, battle maiden, raising things. My mad scientist roommate turned me into his personal robotic battle maiden. Early access, English only. Again, I guess I'm probably not gonna try and make any decisions today at all, so I'm probably gonna be very generous about what gets on a fall list and what potentially even gets a YouTube short. Just because I don't want to spend any extra time at it. We are 3 hours and 21 minutes into the stream. I don't know if this one supports English. It says it does. That being said, I think we can probably turn down this game. Anti-War is an adult game, so let's not show that. I'll describe it. So it seems like it is flat 2D animation of basically the same anime girl over and over again, just butt naked running around shooting at you, and you're running around shooting them, which I don't think that gameplay mechanic even makes a lot of sense. Like the thing you don't want like real world guns shooting people down. That seems ridiculous. What's funny here is they're comparing it to Killer 7, which, yeah, similar to Killer 7, not really. It says it has English full audio and then a whole bunch of other things. One of the things here too is the achievement icons are fairly obscene lewd, so I feel like that is another thing that Valve needs to kind of clamp down on and say the achievement icons can't be nude or lewd, since people do highlight that on their page. Let's see. Hentai Wars is 89 cents and looks like total garbage. It does tell me though that we are going to have some adult games popping up this Friday. Which, yeah, no real reason why they wouldn't. Magical Exposure, a Yuri visual novel that is also obviously furries, anthropomorphic animals. This one is $2.54. This one doesn't seem like it really has any adult content. Also, I think it just said that it's 1 hour less. Less than 1 hour, I guess is what they mean by that. Locked in the Darkness. I'll give that one a chance. Shishu Survival. Nope, I don't think I'd say yes to that. But slight chance there that would have been good. Where some of these other ones we can kind of skip. This Pixel Pet Keeper seems to be probably a clone of Pokemon. But I want to play a Pokemon clone game though. Well, we just really are in the emotionally exhausted realm of my brain, so I really can't make any decisions at all. So in an abundance of caution, I will put it on the follow list. Yep. This is what storefronts do to you all the time, is why you go to a grocery store and you feel like you're exhausted by the time you're halfway through, is that they've thrown so many different things into your brain that you've been emotionally drained and you don't have that energy to make a proper decision. And so then you tend at grocery stores and superstores to end up buying extra things. And unlike Steam, which has a follow list that you can just add things to, most real world stores don't have a good equivalent of that. Although if you are shopping online, you can do some of that, but often it's not very well designed or really well programmed. This Choo Choo Charles, I guess maybe is out of early access, because I feel like this game has been out for a while. This Choo Choo Charles game is weird. I've seen several YouTubers play it, and it's kind of a gimmick. But it does seem like at this point it has moved itself from being a silly internet meme to an actual experience, an actual weird experience. It's rated very positively, so I'll put that on the wish list and make a YouTube short around it. We have another hidden object game. And I guess at this point, these hidden object games should just get YouTube shorts. Hell Dungeons, The Last Soul. I think we can probably say no to that. Tiny Detour. The middle mouse button click to close a page is working nicely. I didn't feel exhausted today moving my mouse around, which has been a problem in the past. Although I also wore those compression gloves I wore for like a minute or two. Maybe I should do that also before I stream. Yeah, I'll give this a... This is an adult-only game. Why is this an adult-only game, though? Alcohol, drugs, self-destructiveness from self-harm, nudity, and sexual content. Interesting. Fear and Hunger 2, Termina. Really doesn't seem like this would be in the adult-only section, considering how the adult-only section is really just the nudity section. Well, I'll put this on the follow list, but I can't do a YouTube short on it anyways because of the way OBS is. It would pop up an age gate warning. So, I'm interested perhaps in Fear and Hunger 1 then. This 2 is in the adult only section. Yeah, it really doesn't feel like it's a series that is playing that much into adult content. This might be just the case of somebody over censoring themselves and putting themselves in the adult section, when the best standard way in which people do this is that they won't censor themselves or put themselves in the adult section unless Steam or Valve forces them to, or unless your game is just straight up porn. And yeah, most of the adult only section games are just really straight up porn and not really containing enough interactive content. I won't say artistic value, I'll just say they don't have enough interactive content to justify their existence outside of the adult only section. I almost said yes to that game. That one looks like garbage. Is this an adult game? Nope. So this is just a visual novel. Animation doesn't look amazingly good. English with allegedly full audio. I think we'll say no to that though. No time for caution. 3D parkour game. There was a lot of 3D parkour games that came out, but I very possibly have just missed the boat on those games now. And I'm probably better off by missing the boat on them. Because now there's probably a decent 5 or 6 parkour games on my fall list that I think I would be more than happy to say no to. Give that a short. 7-Day Rose. Basically anything with a visual novel look to it, I'm assuming might be an adult game. A little bit better animation here. This is what I would call flat 2D colorful, just because of the skin tones and the hair colors of it, at least some of the characters. Do I want to put this on the fall list though? Nah. I'm just raising my standards, I think, a little bit on visual novels. Cowgirl here. Almost certainly this has to be an adult game. Yeah. So Cowgirl 2 is like anthropomorphic animal. Seems like it really is just jigsaw puzzles. Thinking they're not really implying a lot, so I wonder if this is like a censored game. It kind of feels like this whole outfit probably has been censored somewhat. Like the whole blue part may have been missing. But the actual game does seem to just be a collection of jigsaw puzzles with a character on the side, which is a really bad way to make a jigsaw puzzle game. It's selling for 84 cents. Lots of languages it says it supports. Yeah, that's a no. And then next we have Hentai P Word 5, which is definitely an adult slide puzzle. It looks like it's a collection of succubus like demon girls that are topless or mostly completely exposed, although they do have like lingerie on. 59 cents English only. Again, it's probably selling itself appropriately. It's in the adult section. It's not something that really you should spend 59 cents on for what is probably less than a dozen images. Let's see. We have what looks like a VR game called Resist. And I guess I could be somewhat loosey-goosey about adding VR games. Noticeably, this one says it's an RPG designed exclusively for VR, but it's not saying anything here about requiring VR, which there used to be a requirement here, and there used to be a warning here, and yet it's labeled as a VR supported game, not required. Which, unless Valve and Steam are changing their labels, I think they clicked the wrong box. Seems like it's a weird game in that you just seem to be floating in the air, shooting at things too, like high in the air. And it says you have a female protagonist, which in VR that means basically nothing. I think we can say no to this game just because probably never going to get VR headsets. Super Beast Hunt is a free game, English only. Looks like it's an attempt at a platformer, like almost say it's probably a first attempt by an indie developer. Has this weird bouncy visuals to it in the way it's animated. Then they're trying to have 3 different characters, which for such a basic game you probably should just have 1 character you start with, not 3. I think we can say no to that. Slay the Zone. Yep, again I'll give it a follow just because I don't want to make a decision. And then our final game that came out today is Sexy Sliders, which is a 2D, more natural art style slide puzzle game. And I'm saying natural because of the hair color and skin tones. Seems like it's mostly focused on maybe 1 or 2 ladies, all with kind of large breasts on the screenshots. It says it has 50 puzzles in it for $4.24, which 50 is the right number, but $4.24 is not. It also says it has male genitalia at some point, but I'm only seeing screenshots of females. It says it has English full audio too, which I would question. Yeah, and I guess there's really not much more that can be said about that. Yep, we are getting an odd balance now. Like, everything I thought I knew was wrong, apparently, or at least things have become incredibly balanced at this point. Perhaps it's because Japanese and Eastern game developers have just given up on making adult games for one reason or another. But we are now getting pretty much an equal balance between a realistic art style and more of an anime art style, and furry games, anthropomorphic animal games. They all seem to be oddly balanced, with the anthropomorphic furry games being slightly fewer, but still quite a lot of them. GameDeveloper.com articles we have here. The FTC sues Microsoft to block its Activision Blizzard merger. We already talked about that. Just there's really no news around it. Here we have the same article headlined a little bit differently, saying a report says Diablo 4 development has been waylaid by talent attrition and mismanagement. Sources claim Blizzard's Dark Fantasy RPG has struggled during the development due to part of the shifting priorities and losing and adding developers. Which, yeah. The fact that somebody was willing to comment on this publicly or anonymously, or 15 people allegedly anonymously commented on this, maybe does imply that there's some real problems happening back in Diablo 4. But it just doesn't matter, really. Like, Diablo 4 will come out when it comes out, and it will be reviewed as a good game when it's out then, regardless whether people struggled to make it or people didn't. There's a lot of great movies where people struggled and they were mismanaged, and it just doesn't show up in the final print. And so we just kind of have to wait and see. And yes, you can be concerned about the working conditions of game developers, but you really shouldn't be that concerned about the working conditions of game developers until you're way more concerned about your own personal working conditions and the working conditions of far less fortunate people than video game developers, of which there's a lot. We already talked about Sony been distancing itself from the Days Gone director, ex-director's comments. They said Elden Ring and God of War dominated the Game Awards. I think that's a fair description. When you look at the statue for the Game Awards that they give out, it definitely is trying to look like a Oscar type angel character as an award. I don't know why you specifically would have picked that, but I don't know what else you really would have picked as an award. It needs to be something that's fairly recognizable from a distance and looks good on a shelf, and something that is kind of like a marble bust or statue on your shelf will always look pretty good. It would be weird if there was, say, a Mario statue that they were giving out, or a Pong statue that was being given out. The Video Game Awards does have its weird triple V hash pattern logo, and they could try for something like that, but I don't like that logo in the first place. Zeros and ones potentially might make some sense if you had just like falling from the sky, kind of like the Matrix, but off-centered zeros and ones. That might be an interesting award to give away, but I imagine they probably just paid an artist to make something that looked like an Oscar, and that was that. Let's see. We already talked about Media Molecule's co-founder and art director departing in 2023. Which, yeah. Leave it at that. Riot Games is suing NetEase over alleged Valorant clone Hyperfront, which I don't think this is the first time NetEase has tried to sue a competitor, and we'll just have to wait and see if any of these lawsuits actually go through and succeed. Like, the reason why you don't hear too many lawsuits of clones against clones is just because it doesn't look good for your company and it's not worth the money, and copyright around the world is not that strict when somebody makes a clone. Splash Damage acquires Bulkhead to develop a new Transformers studio. Again, you look at the screenshot, and does this really look like Transformers to you, or does this look like some kind of alien invasion game? Because it really looks like an alien invasion game to me, not Transformers. Even if this is supposed to be an Autobot here, you can barely even see it. Let's see, Microsoft Flight Simulator has reached 10 million players. And that was our last article, so let's come over here and let's set this up since it's Friday. And I'll go quickly through my Twitter feed just to see if there's any big news. Almost certainly there won't be any big news. And then that'll be it for this week. Over the weekend, I probably need to schedule some videos and just continue to play more Killer 7. Although I may decide to do some other stuff too, and non-video game related stuff, or I may just take it fairly easy. And then I think I'm pretty much not doing anything the next weekend, so yeah, we definitely are just kind of winding down. As far as the end of the year. Yeah, that was not particularly that thrilling. But is there a real reason to watch another one? Not so much. I probably should play some more off-screen too. I can see spending some extra time this weekend trying to play the Duels Cup. I could also see just ignoring everything anyways. And I guess feedback is welcome about the audio being a little bit quieter too. Let's see. European Commission argues that the FTC's Microsoft lawsuit is unjustified. which is interesting that the European Commission is going to bother to in any way criticize the United States FTC, but I guess that's the world we live in which different countries are arguing against different countries' enforcements of their own laws. Perhaps that means that the European Commission was better bribed, or that the European Commission recognizes a better value to the Europe if the acquisition is allowed. I don't know if I mentioned this, but they did come out and say that Ash Ketchum in the Pokemon anime cartoon is still going to be like the main protagonist after winning the World Championship and becoming the very best. Which I kind of feel like that would have been the perfect time for them to change things. Inherently with Scarlet and Violet, their unwillingness to change things seems to be consistently their problem, though, and that they really should just change the games and how they play, and they should change the cartoon to a different character and just let Ash Ketchum retire. Yeah, okay. Well, I've scrolled down my Twitter feed, and it does still seem like we're getting less and less Twitter posts, but not enough to make me really think Twitter is dead yet. Yep. I will also say I'm seeing an increase in adult lewd cosplayers doing Wednesday Addams again, now that the Netflix Wednesday series is out, which, man, yeah, she is like the one character just below Lolita, I guess, that has inspired cosplay and lewd cosplay around her. Yeah, I did some more research on what the Addams comic strip, the Addams Family comic strip, was all about, and from that perspective, that they were always supposed to be serial killer, crazy, evil people, in that they weren't just supposed to be weird, out of place, macabre, goth-like characters. It makes the characterization in the Wednesday Netflix series make more sense, and the way the series went make a little bit sense. So I actually like it in retrospect the more I thought about it than I first did when finishing watching the Wednesday series. But then the whole lewd cosplaying thing as Wednesday Addams is still just a weird side thing. But then again, you can't deny that there aren't a whole bunch of Bart Simpsons and adult fan pictures out there too. So there are quite a few famous just kid characters that are always depicted as kids that are then put in inappropriate situations when the fans do a Rule 34 on them. Anyways, I'm rambling. That was a conversation that probably didn't need to happen. Anyways, we're really, really late. I'm done with the Game Awards. Fingers crossed. I guess maybe I won a Steam Deck, but almost certainly I didn't. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.